Aha, we are live. Okay. Hey, Edge. Yeah, so I had some difficulties. I mean, I'm not like super late, 3 minutes, but I had some difficulties connecting to DNS, I think. And I didn't do anything. I was about to look into it and it just fixed itself. So here we are. And yeah, you can see there's a bunch of reconnecting, lost connection over here. Anything else fail? Yeah, unable to connect. This one's just a server, so this didn't have to connect to anything. All right, well, let's hope that doesn't keep happening because that's going to make it pretty annoying to use the internet today. It does. But yesterday we made it maybe a third of the way through. I'm not actually positive how long this is because, well, you can see all the different headers that are here. Clicking them expands a lot of them. So who knows how much more I have left to learn. But yeah, I imagine it's about a third of the way. Again, for anyone who is, oh, I gotta update the today command. In fact, you know what? This is one of the things. Update the today command. Start streaming. Yeah, I realized that I used to stream every single day, and it's not like that time is too far from now in the past. But I will eventually just forget what I was doing when it came to streaming into just getting started every day. So it is Friday. Adam is continuing to learn Kubernetes. Let's get the today command from yesterday. Yeah. Okay, and then in that document, I updated something yesterday. So yesterday on stream, I was saying that I should hear back by the end of today about an offer. Apparently, I was wrong about that. It has now changed to early next week, which has almost always meant Wednesday, which I don't think is early next week, but that's what I expect. So I updated the document to reflect that. I'm hoping that I get my eventual manager's email address today so that I can ask, was I on the right track with this stuff? I can't imagine we're too far off right now. Also, let me take a look at something really fast here. Do this off screen. There we go. Okay. Stage 2. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so, hey Glasgow, Pacey 17R. And I edited this. Yeah, I think we're all good. All right, let's just keep learning then. So annotations. You can use Kubernetes annotations to attach arbitrary, non-identifying metadata to objects. This sounds a whole lot like labels. Except, I guess you can't use this metadata later. You can use either labels or annotations to attach metadata. Labels can be used to select objects. Annotation. Okay, yeah. So I think that's what I just said, and apparently that's exactly it. Now, is there anything else to even really write here? It just sounds like these are labels you don't care about selecting. Yeah, that's it. Okay, I'm just gonna write that down here then. If you want to attach if you want to attach metadata to an object without ever being able to select the object based on it, then you should use an annotation. Yeah, the job command, I think people keep expecting that to be something else. So I will probably... I'll do this. Alias job fuck. Yeah, there. Been using Notion as your note taker, not bad. Hey, Founders. Yeah, I wanted to try it at one point. What I found out yesterday is that if you're at Google, you can only use OneNote offline, and that way you're not storing data on someone else's cloud. So I'm probably gonna have to switch to Google Keep, which I wonder. I should probably spend some time learning that. Yeah, write that down. Learn Google Keep. See if there are any migration tools. I don't even know if I want to migrate. I don't know if I even want to migrate. The other thing is, I mean, yeah, just shouldn't say what the other thing is. Doesn't matter. Hey, Neil Cromer. What do you mean switch to keep from OneNote? Yeah. I was just mentioning that apparently if I start at Google that I won't be able to use OneNote for my notes. I'll find out more when I actually start. But hey Kappa, yeah, two streams in a row. Yeah, I figured as long as I've got some momentum, I might as well continue with this. I think we'll hit a point where I'm done with the majority of this, or at least what I found interesting, and then we'll end up kind of not having anything else. Keep is pretty basic compared to OneNote or Notion. Oh no. Oh no. I've actually never even loaded up, as far as I know. Let me see. Okay, here's what I see when I load it. It says dark theme is here. Cool. What will I do for Google? Check out the today command. It talks a little bit more about this. Imagine a kill key. I'm not partaking in Ludum Dare. I didn't even know what was going on. I've never participated in Ludum Dare, and I don't plan on it. I don't generally like the idea of doing it for myself. I think it's a great program for everybody to join. I don't like it. And I don't like any of those kinds of hackathon ideas, I guess. It would probably be a good idea for me to try, but yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not officially a Googler now, just FYI. I still have no offer yet. So I do not officially have the job. Yeah. And hey, I'm Perry. So is this really it? There aren't notes or anything? Or sections? Or this is going to be actually really tough to use if that's the case. Refresh list view and settings. Testeroni. Could I type could I type like a lot of stuff in here? What if I just copy pasted all of this? Oh, paste it as a picture. Okay, that's actually more like OneNote's fault. Oh, this isn't good. You can't even make links to stuff. All right, take care, Neochroma. Yeah, yeah, more of a sticky note app. I wonder if Google has a note-taking app. I don't. I don't technically have to use this, and I think that I was gonna say Google Docs could be used, and I could just maintain things myself at that point. That's not actually a terrible solution. Google note-taking like OneNote. 12 OneNote alternatives you can use. Hmm. I'm. Yeah. I guess that's pretty much it that Google has, right? Best part about using it is it displays all your notes in an easy to view colored card interface. For example, all the red notes are the ones I need to urgently get to. Uh, yeah, this doesn't look like it's going to replace what I'm doing. Yeah. All right, well, maybe I should give it a shot. Yeah, maybe I should give it a shot. But I'll look into that later because at least for now I can use OneNote, so I'll just keep using OneNote. Think about writing my notes with Markdown over OneNote. Feel like I'd waste more time writing notes like that. Yeah, I thought about this before too. I I feel like it would be a waste, and I feel like there might be other things you want to do where you can't necessarily do it. But then again, it is a pretty common format, so it wouldn't be too bad. Can't you just sync your to-do files via Drive? My to-do files are just plain text. With the notes that I take are these like thoroughly linked notes that sometimes have pictures involved. Like if I go to the what was it, Godot game engine, I should have pictures in here. So yeah, something like this, where I can just put it in line. My terrible vector drawings. So it's gonna be a shame to lose all that. Oh well. Have I tried Notion? So to be clear, like the goal here is find a Google product to take notes with. So they apparently don't allow third-party synced like cloud note-taking apps. And so yeah, sure, Notion could be great, but I wouldn't be allowed to use it either apparently. And that's where I was saying if Keep is not good enough, Google Docs is probably just fine. And thank you, Lazy Guru. Yeah. Yeah, alternatively, I guess I could write something myself and just have it sync to Google Cloud. Or maybe someone else has software that's already done that. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna say it seems like this isn't exactly OneNote, but I should still give it a shot and look into how people replicate features from OneNote. Yeah. Yeah, VS Code plugin. Yeah, maybe there's something that just syncs to any cloud you want, and I could pick Google. Yeah, or oh, maybe I just use Markdown notes for a while. Part of what I think is that I don't think it'll stop me from using my personal notebooks, right? So like I have a to-do list that says something like sign up for a Switch Online plan. That's probably not an issue. So it's not like I'd have to change this from my phone or something. But that's one of the nice things about using OneNote is I could use it from any platform. But anyway, doesn't really matter. This is not supposed to be the focus of today. I'll keep looking through this. Foam also looks like a neat VS Code taking tool. All right, I'll write that down too. I'll copy it. Thanks, yeah. All right, so field selectors let you select Kubernetes resources based on the value of one or more resource fields. Here's some examples. Okay, so these are just label selectors, but not necessarily selecting labels. Or, nope, yep, they're not quite label selectors because they don't support set-based requirements. Also, I should probably see if there's any. Yeah. I'm not sure if I want to even write this down. Yeah, I think I want to write this down. I don't think this matters too much. What are some prerequisites for learning Kubernetes? I feel like there's got to be some understanding of containers in general, and what else? Maybe like the ecosystem of why you may want to use this at all. Yeah, spare time. So I think if you understand these couple of things, I think it'll be fine to learn. With that said, from everything I've been hearing from people in stream and a little bit of reading I did outside the stream yesterday, it sounds like Kubernetes is not like a, you've got some free time this weekend, you should learn it and it'll be useful for you. I think it's mostly useful for medium to big companies. I think understanding of cloud computing, yeah, I think this kind of fits in the ecosystem for me. So cloud computing, maybe like project needs. So in general, I don't think there's probably too much you need to learn about those things even. So when it comes to containers, Kubernetes is built around containers mostly. You're starting a small database instance, you're starting a small application server, you're starting a load balancer. Any of these things can be in a container, and how containers work can kind of be drilled down to just a couple paragraphs if you need, so that you can understand it, at least for Kubernetes. And they do that in their getting started guide. So if we go to Or was it? They had it in this one. Yeah. So this is kind of all you really need to know about containers for the sake of Kubernetes, which is that originally you ran just directly on the hardware, and then you switched to running on VMs, and then with containers you don't have this OS layer that's present in each VM. You have the container runtime that's shared, which is sort of like the hypervisor anyway. Takes a lot of work since you need to know a lot for when things are wrong. Yeah, yeah. And we're just starting with the concepts for right now. So I think this might be worth writing down, but maybe I'll put it here. If you want to select based on other fields in an object, i.e. dot labels, you can use field selectors. Okay. Yeah. And then recommended labels, I don't think I care about this too much either. Yeah. This is more of a convention. Okay. Now, how did we fit into this? There we go. Yeah, so now we're on cluster architecture, which I think should be very interesting. What else do we get to after that? Containers, workloads, services, load balancing, storage, configuration, security policies, scheduling. Not too bad. Okay. All right, so let's start with nodes. Kubernetes runs a workload by placing containers into pods to run on nodes. A node may be a virtual, and so we learned about pods yesterday. I've got that in here. Just a set of running containers on a node. That's it. Each node contains the services necessary to run pods managed by the control plane. Yep, and we learned about that yesterday too, which was here. There's the kubelet and the kube proxy. And then there's one other thing, I guess, which is the container runtime. But I don't know if that's really worth saying. Maybe it is. They say it kind of everywhere here. Container runtime. This is what's needed in order to run the containers themselves. And this is just something like Docker, right? Yeah. But they do support other ones. Yeah. Yeah, cryo. I guess they support 4 different ones. But anyway, the point for my definition was pretty much just I just wanted one example. Now, do we have this as a definition that we can link to from a Z glossary? So container runtime. Yes, we do. Neat. So then we'll link to it. That way everything can follow the same format. How lovely. Azure switching to Containerd. I wonder, so I've never heard of this, but I wonder why people use this. Emphasis on simplicity, robustness, and portability. It's a lot of emojis. System. So, I guess the best thing for me to ask with something like this is Containerd versus Docker. What's the difference between these? What are the differences? Let's click this one. And I should have picked this one. All right, no. I think though I'll do a little more research on that at some point. For the sake of what I'm learning now, I don't think it's very important to differentiate between the runtimes, especially given why I'm learning all this in the first place. Why would I use Bing? Thanks, hello. Got the why Bing command. Found it confusing at first how a pod can have many containers, but really a pod typically just has one main container. Sometimes what are called sidecars, like send logs. Interesting. For these notes. Still not sure how this will end up looking. Mainly enterprises work with Docker and some vendors with Cryo. Alright. How much can you earn from Bing? Is it worth it? Wait, one sec. I mean, I would have written it down. Probably in my own words, maybe. It worked out to something like, I don't know, $4 per month. It's not a lot of money, but the way I looked at it is you're just doing searches anyway. Might as well just get something for it. So at this point, it's been a couple $100. I don't know. It's been a while that I've been using it for. Hey, Nate. Okay. So we wrote this stuff down. Typically, you have several nodes in a cluster. In a learning or resource limited environment, you might just have one. Yeah, so I know that they say typically here, in most production environments where you care about something being available and cost of having another VM is not a huge issue, you're going to get more than one. Otherwise, I feel like you don't really gain a whole lot. Okay, two main ways to have nodes added to the API server. The kubelet on a node self-registers the control plane. You or another human user manually add a node object. I wonder why you'd ever do number 2 here. After you create a node object or the kubelet on a node self-registers, the control plane checks whether the new node object is valid. If you try to create this one, node is healthy, is eligible to run on a pod. Kubernetes checks that the kubelet is registered with the API server. Yeah. Okay, so when this is true, it'll attempt to register itself with the API server. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Yeah, here. This will hopefully answer my question. What local setting? Yeah, what are you talking about? Yeah, what I mean is, why are you talking about a local setter? Was it the same project? I don't know what you're talking about. And hey, Goose. Alright, let's look at this. You can create and modify node objects using kube control. When you want to create node objects manually, set registered node equals false. So this turns off self-registration? Yeah. Alright. I guess you will have the same fate as Rygo goes. Goodbye, both of you. I want to find out why you would do that. Oh, whoops, I scrolled too far. Yeah, here. You can modify node objects regardless of the setting of registered node. For example, you can set labels, mark it unschedulable. You can use labels on nodes in conjunction with node selectors on pods to control scheduling. You can constrain a pod to only be eligible to run on a subset of the nodes. They don't say why you do this. Yeah, which I find a little bit strange. Like, I got to here and I'm a little confused as why you do this. You want to add one yourself and not necessarily have it register to just be accepting. Maybe because you want to assign something manually to this node? What feature? Just manually adding nodes into your cluster. Anyway. Well, we should talk about this somewhere, that's for sure. And maybe what I should do is I should separate notes into like a here's what you need if you're a user, and here's what you need if you just learn any concepts of this stuff. But I'll write architecture here. Nodes So by default, nodes auto-register themselves with the control plane via what, kubectl? I guess I should say via the kubelet, right? However, you can also manually register nodes, probably in case you want to probably in case you want to control which pods get run on that node. Well, probably in case you want to manually control that. Is the node shared? Yeah, this node is shared. Yep. It's in programs Kubernetes. And by the way, this note has only been taken as of yesterday. So it's very new, and it's from the mindset of someone who's learning this stuff and not an expert in Kubernetes or anything. So it's like all the other notes, take them with a grain of salt. All right, so after you create it, it creates a node object internally, checks that it's registered to the API server that matches the metadata name field. If the node is healthy, it's eligible to run a pod. Otherwise, it's ignored until it becomes healthy. Okay. Regardless of how a node is registered, if it ever becomes unhealthy, then... So the thing that's checking to see... Here's this picture reference, which I think this is still pretty good. Yeah. So the thing that's checking to see this is going to be the control plane, likely the API. I guess it doesn't really matter what's doing it. It is the control plane. And whenever you say Kubernetes is checking this, you're probably talking about the control plane. Control plane will continually... I don't think this is worth writing. This is how health checks work. Probably part is incorrect. In general, one would just label a node and then have a pod anti-affinity. Par has nothing to do with the nodes being manually enrolled. So, does anyone know why you would manually register a node? I still can't think of a scenario why you'd ever want to do this and not just start up a node and have it register itself. And what kind of app do I use? Yeah, I use OneNote. For testing new hardware, OS, GPUs. Okay. Yeah, Metalstorm. Yeah. I was gonna say probably just for test cases, because this is what it sounds like. Perhaps if there's some preparation. Why would there be a preparation step before this? I know what you're saying, Styler, but I would assume that most nodes in the cluster are just going to end up running containers on it. And probably these nodes are going to be cloud instances somewhere. I guess maybe if you're running this on premises and you haven't set up your machines in that way. Yeah, you know what? I'll just leave it like this. I'll just say probably just for test cases, because this is kind of what it sounds like. And I could write or potentially some edge case. Alright, well, let's keep reading through this then. So if the node is healthy, it's eligible to run a pod. If not, just be checked repeatedly. And the name of an object must be a valid DNS subdomain name. Yeah, okay, sure, I don't care about that. All right, so self-registration. So this is the default, and this is what probably is going to happen like 95% of the time. The kubelet will attempt to register itself with the API server. This is the preferred pattern. I'll say with the API server here. Yeah. For self-registration, it started with the following options: paths or credentials to authenticate itself, how to talk to a cloud provider. I guess these are going to be cloud credentials. That's not what I want. I want to find out about this option. Cloud providers. Oh no, it's just, okay, you have a config file for what likely has the credentials. Yeah. And I wonder if they say what that looks like out of curiosity. Not here, they don't, but that's okay. Can't remember if you used it before. I have not. Did the Google interviews ask about experience or knowledge of it? What'd you say? What'd they say? Did they suggest learning before? So some of this is in the today command, but I'll try to just answer these questions anyway. So in the interviews, it was for the cloud configuration team, and they said that, oh, hey, some of the things that we kind of work with or on, and they had to be a little bit secretive about this, is like Kubernetes, and then they listed a few other technologies. I'll just list them as like Tech A, Tech B, Tech C. And I said, hey, is it important that I know this stuff going into the job? And he's like, well, ideally, you'd be an expert in it. And he said, but you could learn this stuff. So I figured I won't get to expert status before I even start the job, but I can at least be familiar with enough so that I've got a leg up. And that's where these streams come in. So if I spend, let's say, I don't know, 12, 16 hours learning this, then hey, that's like half a work week I don't need to spend covering it. And I can go learn other things. I think the big reason why I'm doing this though is because the way I see it is like you're kind of capped on hours per day learning. If you spend 12 hours in a day trying to learn something, I don't think you're going to have much more of a result than you'd have at, let's say, 5 hours of learning in a day. And this is what I've at least noticed for myself. But then again, I have not tried to split it up as like 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening. It's usually just been this marathon session of like 5-ish hours. And 5 hours, I think, is like roughly my cap. So the more of these sessions I can get in where I'm within that limit, I think the better. Yeah, there's learning and practicing for sure, for sure. And like I said, I'm mostly just going to cover concepts because I don't know what concrete things I'm going to be doing. And part of the reason for that is because I'm not in touch with the eventual manager yet, but I'm hoping to be today so that by Monday I can find out what I should be doing concretely here. Because I find it unlikely that what I've learned so far is going to be useless. But what if I hear, oh, you know what? Turns out you should just be using Terraform like every single day. Then it's like, well, that wasn't even on my radar. So, would you get paid while learning if you do it on the job? Yeah. Yeah. Would you say your minimum is? Like, how much should you spend to feel like you get in the zone or get something out of it? That is definitely based on what I'm learning at the time. One of the things that's been really, really cool. So I started Adam Learns back in like February, and I did it until about May. And in that time, one of the main goals was like learn something quickly to be able to complete a project. And so we did a bunch of these projects, and I think it turned out pretty well. And so I think now at this point, I've got at least a decent track record of diving into something I've never known about and then making some progress with it. So we made a Minecraft plugin, we made an NES ROM, we learned a lot about hacking. There wasn't really a project there. There were these labs that we did. We learned Godot and made a game in that, made a website on Firebase. So I have a feeling that learning Kubernetes is going to be kind of the same way, except that the stream component is really only going to focus on the concepts. So at some point, I will likely have to dive into this, and I don't think I'll be able to stream that. But that's why I want to get into this habit of do whatever I can here. So yeah, what is the minimum? Like I said, based on technology, based on what you already know. But I think it's probably like half an hour, but it could even be 15 minutes. Hey, Flying Meat, no, I have not accepted an offer yet. And does the job have allocated time for learning new tech? I don't know. So what's happened so far is there were the interviews. Those were done as of like August 26th or something. Then there was team matching, and team matching boiled down to 4 teams. And let's just, for the sake of ease, just say that each one was about an hour. So the team that I'm going to end up on, this cloud configuration team, I have now talked to for 1 hour. And in that time, I was mostly asking about like, okay, what's the culture? What's the management style? What's the like testing? What's, whatever else. So I didn't necessarily get to ask about the specifics of the job because at that point I didn't know that that would be my job. And now that I do, I'd like to talk to this person again and ask some of these questions. So, yeah, I don't know if they're going to be like, you know what, you need to learn this stuff for the job, but then it'd be nice if you could learn these, go do it on your own time. I don't know if that's going to happen. I kind of doubt it. From what I've heard of Google, there's what, like 20% time or something is what they call it. And you're able to kind of just do what you want, and that will hopefully bring some value to the company. And that's where I'd probably slot in learning. Although, I don't know what this is like from an internal perspective. It worked out well for you. Might try. Yeah, it's worked out. I'd say pretty well. Usually, my goal is like a project, and so reading through docs is just the start of it, and then there's some amount of practice that goes with it. With this, like I said, I'm not going to be doing practice because I don't. The goal is not just like have fun and learn. The goal is aim toward the job that I'll be doing, and I unfortunately don't know what that aim should be until I talk to the manager, which I haven't been able to do because I don't have their email address. So yeah, that's kind of where we stand, and it's a little hard to communicate that throughout the day because I think most people are like, "Oh, Kubernetes, like, what are you working on? Why are you learning it?" And it's a very fuzzy answer. How do you practice? What's your method? The practice is usually just make a project. And so with something like an NES ROM, at first it was just like get a graphic on the screen or something like that, or handle input, and then at some point it's going to be make a game. So your project, you kind of have to prove that you can do the individual steps, and then yeah, set out toward that project you're going to do. That's what I think is really nice for practicing. Nice thing about projects is it gives you a set of goals that will keep moving, and that way you don't just feel like, oh well, my only goal was get a graphic on the screen, and now I'm just done to do. I don't have any other next goal. For us, our devs have a specific budget and R&D time for learning stuff. Um, they were a little secretive about this. Like I said, like they're building something, and I don't think it can be shared publicly. So I don't know what it is even, and I only know what technologies it sort of has to do with. So that's what I wrote down, and that's what we learned. Yeah, it's possible I deal more with Borg, and it's I think likely that there's going to be some overlap in concept, and yeah, I will. I'm doing what I think is going to be helpful, and like I said, it's possible that it doesn't end up being helpful, but I find that unlikely at this point. This is probably good stuff to know, no matter what. Okay, so we got this. I was looking at the cloud provider briefly, and what we found out is a cloud provider is just an identifier for that cloud, like AWS, and then cloud config is how you'd set this up. So something I am still a little bit curious about is like Kubernetes cloud config. Mm, I don't totally expect this to be a thing. I just want to know about that one option. I wonder if cloud config spec. Here it is. Ah, yes. So, do we have? Yes, yes, yes. We do have credentials in here. Yeah, that makes sense. I just didn't know how these things would be provided. And even if this is wrong, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. I don't think they require that you learn outside your job. Yeah. Hang on one sec. I'm dropping a ton of frames. I'm gonna put this counter up. Wait, darn it. That's what I want. The icon looked too similar. Alright, so there we go. We have a drop frame counter. When making projects during practice, how long does that take you? How do you set up constraints so that it doesn't take you too much time? I think I have playlists for this stuff. Darn it, I don't remember where these are anymore. I'll write this down. Thank you, Flying Meat. I will take a look into that. Where are those playlists? Maybe you just go to my YouTube channel. Yeah, they should just be in here, right? Yes. Okay, so this might kind of help understand this. So, for example, making the NES ROM, this was these 5 videos. And so you can see that it fit into, I'm just going to quickly estimate, like 30 hours of time. And yeah, we had some goal. I learned some things. We kept kind of narrowing down toward that. Whenever you're whenever you're setting up a project, I think the most important thing is to focus on scope to make sure that it's not too big. I don't think you really ever have to worry about a project being too small in scope because you can usually expand scope, but it's much harder to contract scope. And what's the goal of today? The goal of today is just keep going through the documentation so that I hopefully get to like here-ish down to security, let's say. Hey, Smooth. Okay, let's take a look at what Flying Me linked in, which is this. Okay, yeah, but this does have a client ID and a client secret. So same thing. It does have the credentials directly in here. All right. I was curious about this. All right, let's see. So manual node administration we looked at, and then node stats. Hey, Revest, welcome back. Sorry, I have scope creep, not scope withdrawal. All right, so node status contains the following information: addresses, conditions, capacity, and allocatable, and info. So none of this, except for I guess info, kind of makes sense right now. Let's see. Oh wait, oh they're just described down. Okay, fine. The usage of these fields varies depending on your cloud provider or bare metal configuration. So host name, as reported by the node's kernel, be overridden. External IP and internal IP. Okay, makes sense. Conditions, though, what are these? Ready. Okay, that makes sense. Disk press. True if pressure exists on the disk size. Interesting. Oh, it's not disk press, it's disk pressure. That wasn't clear. I would have realized it for this one, I guess. Memory pre. Alright, true if, yeah. And then PID pressure and network unavailable. Interesting. Yeah, so these are resources that can run out, of course, unlike CPU, where if you're using 100%, there's still a CPU. And true if the node is not correctly configured, otherwise false. I wonder how this could happen. Okay. How's Kubernetes treating you? I mean, it's very hard to answer that because I think any realistic learning scenario here would involve actually using Kubernetes at some point. And again, my timeline is yesterday was started learning this. Today is just continue. And then probably on Monday is have a more guided approach since I'll hopefully have talked to my eventual manager. You know, hearing disk press immediately made me think of that Juicero juicer, this giant scam that came out that literally just pressed a juice bag into a glass. This probably always had disk press set to true. Okay, so node condition is represented as a JSON object. So ready. Wait, what? Oh, this is one condition. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Oh, cool. Okay, that's pretty neat. So you get a full rundown of exactly what's going on for each condition. For simple Kubernetes setup, check out K3 setup and kind. Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing that because, like I said, I don't think we're going to do anything concrete today. And maybe Monday we'll learn that I'm not on the right track or that I am on the right track, and maybe we'll get to something concrete. And maybe I just won't be streaming next week. I'm not sure. So a lot's up in the air for sure. Yeah, greatly depends on the goal as well. Huge difference between setting up a prod ready K cluster. Yeah. And how is learning this? I don't think I'm going to have a standard experience learning this because I think at some point what you do, if you were to just click this link and go to documentation, they have tried Kubernetes on here. And you could just go install Minikube, for example, and presumably go check out some, like a cluster with your nodes running and pods running. And I'm likely not going to do that. So it's been fine to learn so far. This is pretty standard for how I learned actually some of the last few things that I did. The last kind of projects we did were TypeScript, Golang, and Rust, and we didn't finish this. But all of these, I spent time going through all the documentation and then never made a project in it. So again, very unusual because why would you learn a language or why would you learn a technology if you're not going to use that language or technology? But I have a feeling that's going to help. I know that a lot of what I'm going to do is going to be in Go. And now I have all these notes that if I were to just read through this, I think it would give me a pretty good overview and remind me of what had happened then, which is the whole point of these notes. I can give you feedback on the docs in a couple days. If I had that in mind yesterday, I might have written down a couple things. But, alright, I'll try to keep track of it now. Because I had one thing for this. My feedback is gonna probably not be super helpful, but this page mentions self-registration of nodes without going to why you may want this. Hey, Tequila. Yeah. So, like I said, if I could reach out to my eventual manager, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to steer me in the direction of here's what you're going to be doing on the job, so here's what you should go learn. Now, they might also say you can't share the reasons exactly behind why you're learning this, but it's public technology, so just go learn it. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be with respect to streaming. Right now, why I feel comfortable doing any of this is one, all of what I'm doing is obviously totally public. Like you guys can just go to this URL. Two, I don't know what it's for, so I can't leak any information because I don't know the information. And what's that notebook app called? This is OneNote. This is VS Code with a To Do Plus plugin. If you look at programs, it's got I think almost all the programs. So we looked at conditions. We did not look at capacity and allocatable. Although we didn't get done with conditions, I guess. If status of ready condition remains unknown or false for longer than the pod eviction timeout, an argument passed to the queue controller manager, all the pods on the node are scheduled for deletion. Default eviction timeout duration is 5 minutes. So does that mean then that if this is no longer ready for some reason, that it'll think that the pods are running fine for 5 minutes? Or it'll know immediately that they're not running fine, but won't actually delete them for 5 minutes? In some cases, when the node is unreachable, the API server is unable to communicate with the kubelet on the node. The decision to delete the pods cannot be communicated until communication with the API server is established. In the meantime, the pods that are scheduled for deletion may continue to run on the partition node. Okay. So I guess it's in network partitions you might run into unknown here. That the control plane can't reach out to the kubelet. So that the pods don't actually stop. Because it's possible that they're still accessible to what needs them. Okay. Does not force delete pods until it's confirmed that they've stopped running. You can see the pods that might be running on an unreachable node by being in the terminating or unknown state. In cases where Kubernetes cannot deduce from the underlying infrastructure if a node has permanently left a cluster, the cluster administrator may need to delete a node object by hand. I wonder how frequently this happens. Deleting the node object causes all the pod objects running in the node to be deleted and frees up their names. Okay. Yeah, learning Kubernetes sort of as part of the job. Again, I have not actually gotten the job offer yet, but I think it's gonna happen probably by Wednesday. It was supposed to happen by the end of the day, I thought, but I think I might have misunderstood. Hey, Amy. Rami, you don't actually have a sub icon. Oh, you have the founder icon. And what is Kubernetes? I actually don't think I have a command for that. I should have one. Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is container orchestration software. Well, it's more than just that, is what I should say. So how should I make this a little bit more approachable? Because I could say that automates deployment, scaling, etc. Eh, I'll be lazy about it for right now and just say this. Right now, I think Rami is the channel's only subscriber. I don't think anyone else can use the emotes except for me. So deleting the node object from Kubernetes causes all pods. Yeah, so we read that. Node lifecycle controller automatically creates taints. So we haven't learned about this, but we do know that it's coming up. Wait, no, maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe it's not coming up. Okay, maybe we should read about that. I thought it was one of the things that if I just scroll down the page, it'll be there. Oh, this is for part of node affinity? Oh yeah, this is coming up. Okay, then let's ignore it for now. Well, no, let's not ignore it. Let's look at briefly what they are. Node affinity is a property of pods that attracts them to a set of nodes. Taints are the opposites. So I thought they were called anti-affinities. Maybe they're synonyms. Tolerations are applied to pods. Okay. Yeah, so that's fine. For now, at least, that's fine. I'll look more into it later. Definitely the evangelist line. This is what I had written in my notes before I even started with Kubernetes, which was like 2 years ago when all I wanted to write down was the pronunciation. You should even your account. Don't forget to install Flappy Bird on your account first. Sell for even more money. It's sub icons and a game. Node controller does not force delete pods until it's confirmed they stop running. Node lifecycle controller automatically creates taints that represent conditions. Scheduler takes the node's taints into consideration when assigning a pod to a node. Pods can also have tolerations, which let them tolerate a node's taints. Interesting. So this is sort of like when you've got, what's a good example? It's maybe like a get ignore almost. You can almost look at things like there's an exclude and an include, and then actually for our exclude we want includes for our excludes. So it sounds sort of like that's what tolerations are. That you have affinities, you have these anti-affinities. Oh wait, but then actually we can tolerate some of these anti-affinities. There's probably a good reason for doing that. But we'll cover that later. Yeah. Alright, so capacity and allocatable describes the resources available on the node. CPU, memory, maximum number of pods. The fields in the capacity block indicate the total amount of resources that a node has. The allocatable block indicates the amount of resources on a node that's available to be consumed. Okay, got it. So combined, you can figure out how much is in use, how much is total, and how much is left. You may read more about capacity and allocatable, don't care right now. Info describes general information, such as kernel version, Kubernetes version, Docker version, OS name. Yeah, pretty reasonable too. Okay, I want to write some of this stuff down. A node, what is it, reports these things? A node status contains the following information. Contains 4 major pieces of information. Addresses, e.g. external/internal IP addresses. Then conditions, e.g. whether the node is ready for pods to be scheduled, whether the disk or memory is running out. Okay, then capacity and allocatable, e.g. total resources, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and how much is left to be allocated, 2 GB remaining. just giving a quick example here. And then finally info, e.g. the OS version, Kubernetes version, etc. Yeah, not OS name. Thanks, Lax. Yeah, and again, just to be clear, it has not finalized. It would be very, very uncomfortable if next week I'm like, so guys, no job. Something fell through. Wouldn't that be funny? It would be funny. It'd be fairly unfortunate. So the node controller is a Kubernetes control plane component that manages various aspects of nodes. So node controller, I don't see that in here. So this is something new for us? No, wait, the controllers run on the controller manager, and the node controller is just one of those, and they're all running in one process is what we learned. Yeah. That was here. Controller manager, of which one of them is the node controller. Yes. The node controller. Probably reopen that page. Or the replication controller. Yeah. So that's this part is split into node, replication, endpoint, and service account token. Yeah. Okay, node controller has multiple roles and a node's life. The first is assigning a CIDR block to the node when it's registered, if CIDR assignment is turned on. Second is keeping the node controller's internal list of nodes up to date with a cloud provider's list of available machines. When running in a cloud environment, whenever a node is unhealthy, node controller asks the cloud provider if the VM for that node is still available. Okay, yeah, and that's the cloud controller. So this itself does not know how to check the health, but this does, and this knows how to talk to this. So it transitively knows how to check the health. A third is monitoring the node's health. Node controller is responsible for updating the node ready condition of node status to condition unknown when a node becomes unreachable. Yep. Later, evicting all the pods from the node. Okay, this sounds reasonable too, but I did have one question. I guess everything that the controller managers do is through the API. So monitoring health, this thing needs to proxy it all through the API, I'm guessing. I'd like to look more into that. How is the job hunt gone? Yeah, check out the document in the command you typed. Yeah, that should answer everything. The nodes talk to the API only. Yeah, okay. Also note that I think I might have already written this. Note that the nodes themselves only talk to the API server. So if the node controller needs to ask for the health status of a node, it will go through the API server. Okay, yeah. So then we learned the mechanism by which this works. And the other parts of this make sense. Okay. And heartbeats sent by Kubernetes nodes help determine the availability. There are two forms, updates of node status and the lease object. Do we learn about this officially in here or no? No, this is a totally different page. And it's taking a very long time to load. I can see from the scroll bar, this is another one of those like 40,000 line pages. Well, unfortunately, for it to go to the anchor link, it needs to load the whole page. So who knows what we're about to learn. I wonder if we can just leave that in the background. Each node has an associated lease object in the cube node lease namespace. Lease is a lightweight resource. Which improves the performance of the node heartbeats as the cluster scales. I wonder how this works. Here it is, apparently. Oh, this isn't helpful though. This is what the object looks like, presumably as the JSON representation. Two strings and object meta and least spec. I waited all that time for this. This is such a large page. You know, this reminds me of, if you ever look at the Lodash docs, every single function has a source button on it. So let's say you just click difference by and you click source. It's that exact same experience where it goes to line, 7,000 of a 17,000 line GitHub file. And so it needs to do syntax highlighting on this whole thing and just takes forever. So you don't get n squared heartbeat storms. I'm guessing that's supposed to be a squared icon or squared. Gotta learn your alt codes. Anyway, I'm not gonna wait for this to load for the sake of an example. So I'd still like to know how that works exactly. But yeah, nodes themselves send heartbeats in two forms. Updating the node status or via the lease object, which is a way to improve performance as the cluster scales. How do I learn more about that? Multiple people have many hands. Just want to know, how does this work? This is some other site completely. And I wanted to find out how this actually functions. But apparently no one talks about it. Alright, well. Yeah, let's just keep reading. Alright, Kubelet is responsible for creating and updating this and a lease object. Kubelet updates a node status either when there's a change in status or if there's been no update. Default interval is 5 minutes. Okay. By default, the status updates happen when there's a change in status or every 5 minutes by default. So it updates its lease object every 10 seconds. Lease updates occur independently from node status updates. If this fails, the kubelet retries with exponential backoff. Okay. The part that doesn't make any sense is, why are these separate? Oh, I guess because you always want to know node status being updated is one of the forms of a heartbeat, but keeping the status up to date in the control plane itself is also important. That's probably why. The Ultramark. What's this? Whoa, nice. This is awesome. Okay, yeah. Thanks for linking that. I will put this in my notes. For more information about the lease object works, check out, what do we call this? Check out this enhancement on GitHub. Yeah. Rob, I don't know if you noticed, but enough people accidentally typed it as toady that I just made it resolve to the command. So you could have actually just left the command at that. Okay, yeah. Alright, so while running different scalability tests, we observed that in big enough clusters, more than 2,000 nodes, with non-trivial number of images used by pods on all nodes, we are hitting etcd limits for database size. That effectively means that etcd enters alert mode and stops accepting all write requests. The underlying root cause is a common... By the way, this must have been a nightmare to figure out. Because probably my guess of what happened, and this might be totally off, is that some company was just like, the system doesn't work and we don't know why. And then someone needed to collect a bunch of diagnostic information, figured this out. Nice, Saxton. And now you're back down to hardly any. Yeah, let's all type our Adam party emotes. Okay, so underlying root cause is a combination of this, keeping both current state and transaction log with copy on write. Node heartbeats being potentially very large objects. Note the images are only one potential problem. The second are volumes, and customers want to mount 100 plus volumes to a single node. So heartbeats going to be 15 kilobytes. Ah. Kubelet sending heartbeats every 10 seconds. I wonder why that part is. It would only be on updates or if they updated the default. Maybe they're just updating it frequently. Currently by default, lack of node status update. Okay. Need to reserve that. Goal, reduce size of this. Non-goal. Use resource usage of control plane. Alright, proposing to introduce a new lease built-in API in the newly create API group coordination. Make it easily reusable for other purposes. It'll be namespace. Its schema will be as follows. Spec is effectively already existing leader election record. Only difference is using microtimes instead of time. Use that object to represent node heartbeat. For each node, there will be a corresponding lease object with name equal to node name. Okay. Namespace should be created automatically and never be deleted. Okay, yep. Considered using CRD. This, I don't know what CRD is. Okay, change the kubelet so that it's periodically computing node status every 10 seconds. It's reporting this if there was a meaningful change or it didn't report. Okay, so we wrote that in the notes already. And then it creates and periodically updates its own object, and frequency of those updates is independent. Yeah. Does this have some hash of... No. So in the meantime, we changed node controller to treat both updates of node status object as well as updates of new lease object. I feel like what's missing here. So the lease object can basically just tell it it's healthy, but not exactly what that health might mean. And then if this happens independently from sending node status, how did this solve the problem if you're still in one of these 2,000 node systems with 100 mounted volumes? Custom resource definition. Okay, thank you. Where did I end up working? I still haven't actually gotten a job offer, but it should be Google. Probably streaming next week. Probably. So to answer this question, here's what I expect. I expect to get my eventual manager's email address today and send an email asking what I should learn. And I also want to mention the stream, just for full disclosure. Maybe that's not a good idea. So I'm not totally sure if my manager ends up saying something like, you know what, just read this book. And if they say read the book, then I can't do that on stream, right? I'm not going to stream someone's copyrighted book. So I don't know. But the plan currently is at least to stream for a little bit of next week. How much is a computer scientist paid in your country? This was just asked yesterday. So my country is the US. And if you go to insights.stackoverflow.com/survey, yeah. I actually think that URL was correct, but still, let's just find it again. Yeah, so if you click United States here, this is of people who were responding to this who skewed more senior, I guess. And if we just briefly look at this, average of averages is roughly like 125K, I guess. But I will link this in. It's kind of like a token that Node holds onto. It'll check locally every 10 seconds, but on change, it reports FPL at least. Where did that tab go? Here it is. It still doesn't totally make sense to me. So I guess my questions still so far. So if the original problem was that health checks got to be too heavy, e.g. in a 2000 node system with lots of volumes, then how does the lease object solve this if Kubernetes still sends node status update? And also, what did the system need with node status that now can't be determined by the lease object? It only reports state changes. Maybe I'm not understanding the original problem. In my mind, the original problem was just state changes were clogging the system. Well, and by the system, I mean etcd. So they said that it was 15 kilobytes. Where did that go? Yeah, they said there were 15 kilobytes, but the sent data over the network was very small. But what's weird to me is, I guess, and maybe it's in lease spec or object meta, that the change is being communicated over the lease object. Okay, take care. Ultramark. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm guessing this is a game? Yeah, it is. Reporting results in expensive operations in etcd. I'm missing something still. Yeah, maybe the true issue, maybe the original problem was that someone configured heartbeats to send every 10 seconds instead of the 5-minute default. So 1/30th of the original time. For event is small, but as a result of the event, it saves a very large object. Yeah, but this still happens. They say in the proposal that yeah, the frequency of lease updates is independent from node status updates. Okay, wait. Maybe this part is new. Yeah. They previously were okay, I see. I thought this was happening already in the old way. And I guess part of what confused me about that is because that's what the documentation says, but the documentation says that since this enhancement has been made. Otherwise, the documentation couldn't say that. Yep, got it. Okay. Hey, yo. Let me write some of this down. It used to be that nodes would report node status regardless of whether there were meaningful changes. So essentially, I think it kind of boils down to this. The old way is that the heartbeat was only in the form of node status and it included tons of information. And the new way is the lease object is just a ping with no real information, and the node status only gets sent if there was a meaningful change. I wonder if this is accurate. Kind of. I mean, I guess for me to be able to say that it's just a ping means I need to understand what these things are. And it actually does say that both are optional. None of these are big. Except labels and annotations could be, I suppose. It should be. Basically a local node status cache using the lease as a reporting token. Okay, yeah. So yeah, now they're only sent when there's a change, and the lease object is a reporting token. That I still want to find out more about. I guess they don't use the. Let me see. Should be both updates of node status objects as well as updates of the lease object corresponding to a given node as healthiness signal. Yeah. And the lease object is more of a ping just for healthiness than to include much about the status itself. Google's cafeteria is only available when you're going into work. So Hafsain, I've heard things about that too, but for at least like 6 months it won't matter. And OMG Scoots, there's an emote that hasn't existed for a while. And why the comma after now, that's at least how I would say things. But it may not be grammatically correct. But this I'm not too concerned with. Can you take pudding home? I don't know. And hey, Bob. Congrats on the job, Bob. Okay, well, I think I'm fine with this. I don't know how much more I want to look into. Oh, it's actually not too bad. Yeah, let's just finish reading. All right, audit all other existing core controllers, verify if they also don't require similar changes. Change controller manager to auto register. What was CRD again? Custom resource definition. What is that? Is that something that shows up in the glossary? Custom. Yeah, it is. I guess I'll write it down over here. Custom resource definition. I don't know what it is. Custom code that defines a resource to add to your Kubernetes API server without building a complete custom server. So I guess we'll say a way of extending the Kubernetes API server if it doesn't meet your needs. You just see it as a filler pause. Yeah, like I said, this to me isn't too important. So I fully admit this could be wrong and that I'm just not going to focus on it. What do you think about people who take pudding home from the cafe? Now we're asking the hard-hitting questions. I think they're the scum of the earth. No, I think that probably in any setting like this, a lot of food goes wasted. And so hopefully there's a way of them donating food. The US has some kind of weird laws around this, from what I understand. Like, from what I understand, was it restaurants in France or something have a requirement to donate the food that they don't consume? I don't know. putting bandits, aka PBs. All right, change controller manager auto register. Ensure the lease resource is deleted when the corresponding node is deleted. So once all the code changes are done, we'll start updating lease objects every 10 seconds. 40 seconds. Ah, so originally the timeout, yeah, this will reduce it further later. What date was this? Last commit on June 12th. Well, let's look at the history. When was this proposed? What am I looking at? Is this not the history of this one markdown file? What did this do? Yeah, this did a file renamed without changes. So it's at least existed since 2018. And I guess if I click older, it doesn't work. So yeah, 2018-ish. So back then, when they said, hey, we're going to increase this to 40 seconds and then eventually increase it further, they've already done that because they mentioned here that it's 5 minutes. So, okay, that's interesting. Reduce the frequency further. Yep. Further reduce the update frequency. Okay, great. Unsuccessful attempt to enable server-side apply. Okay, yeah. I wonder how a proposal like this was put together because it seems like these people had a lot of insight into the system and how this could involve making changes everywhere. Oh, they linked to the issue and the pull request. 2015. And then when was this submitted? Yeah, like 2018. Okay. What, do they make you work on a Mac? Do you just quit right then and there? I've worked on a Mac for a year before, and it took about a month to get used to it. So what I think is that I'm probably going to get a choice of Linux or Mac. That's my guess. And maybe Windows is part of that choice, but it's such a faint choice that it's not worth choosing. So I honestly think this will be a very tough choice. And what I think I want to go with is whatever the majority of the team is using, because that means that I'll be able to get the most support for whatever I'm doing. And yeah, then whatever I end up with is going to probably be a little bit of a pain because there's a lot of logistical reasons. But I'm totally happy to switch. I don't mind that. No, this isn't sidetracking. This is good because I wanted to know how this thing worked. And I feel like I know how it works now. I'm not positive. Yep. I'll be using Vim or Emacs. I'm going to use notepad.exe. I'll emulate it through Wine. I think that's the best coding environment. Notepad actually has a really cool feature where when you press F5, it puts in a timestamp. There's no program where you can do that as fast as you can do it in Notepad. Yeah. Oh no, I know about VS Code being on Linux. My laptop has Linux on it right now. I don't own a Mac, although I know VS Code's also on Mac. But even if whatever editor I wanted wasn't necessarily there, I don't know how much it's going to matter because I have not extensively used Golang, and I also obviously don't know what Google's internal tooling looks like. So it's possible they wrote their own IDE or something that just makes more sense to use with a specific language. So for example, if I were ever to work with Java, I'd use something like Eclipse or IntelliJ or some other thing. I would not be using Visual Studio Code, even though it's what I'm most comfortable with, just because Java is one of those languages that I feel types itself. And so why not take advantage of that? I don't know what Eclipse, probably IntelliJ, fine, but you know what I mean. I'd use an IDE for that. Okay. Reliability. In most cases, node controller limits the eviction. Node controller. Have they ever said that before? No, they said the node controller. Okay, time to put this in my doc feedback. There. We want to evict pods from more than one node per 10 seconds. Whoa, what? It won't evict pods from more than one node per 10 seconds. Why would you want this? The node eviction behavior changes when a node in a given availability zone becomes unhealthy. Node controller checks what percentage of nodes in the zone are unhealthy. At the same time, okay, they're explaining it now. So if the fraction of unhealthy nodes is at least this, then the eviction rate is reduced. If the cluster is small, they're stopped. They become okay. So they do this for partitioning reasons. This all has to do with the cap theorem, and the P is partition tolerance, and this is a partition tolerance mechanism. Interesting. And they use the term availability zones, which I believe is AWS parlance, but I'm guessing what they mean by this is different regions of the world. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. They probably also put that in their terminology. Where'd that go? Here. No, they don't. Yeah. Guess they just assume. You know what it means. Hey, Noise. I'm doing well. And hey, Jupiter. Yeah. Metal Storm. Give me a t-shirt, please. I've heard a lot about these hackathons just ruining open source contributions for the time that they go on. Oh boy. All right. So I think I got the gist of this. Also responsible for evicting pods running on nodes with no execute taints, unless those pods tolerate that taint. Okay. Took you about a month. That sounds about right. Yeah. And then, and I've said this before, there's a bunch of little things that just don't exist between the operating systems and that you probably can't replicate and that will just endlessly vex me. And they're very minor. And so the only one I really remember is on Windows, if you're on a page that has a large scroll bar, like let's say this. So I'm looking at Cube Scheduler and I see, oh wait, pods, like where is that? And I scroll up. If I'm still holding the scroll bar and I drag the mouse inward, it'll snap back to where I dragged from. So this behavior exists on Windows. It does not exist on Mac. And some programs just emulate it anyway. So like in Visual Studio Code, for example, I think if you drag and you hit escape, no, it doesn't. It doesn't do that there. Sublime definitely does. But yeah, on Mac, that's not a thing. And I frequently use this purposely because I'm like, yeah, there's a thing here. Let's scroll down. Oh, there it is. And then scroll back up. It just doesn't work. What do? You just throw your computer out the window. All right, node objects track information about the node's resource capacity. For example, memory, number of CPUs. Nodes that self-register report this during registration. If you manually add it, you need to set it when you add it. Again, it's weird that you have to do this. I wonder if that's another reason maybe to manually add nodes. You could say that it's got fewer resources than it really has, but I don't know what scenario you'd have for that. Because like I said, if your nodes are doing something other than being part of your Kubernetes cluster, then it probably should not be on that node. And if you even have a Kubernetes cluster in the first place, you probably have enough money to buy another like $5 a month VM and do whatever that node was going to do anyway. I guess you'd have to have some very specific reason that it can't just go into a container. Just throw up a Winbox in GCP. Guessing they let you use as much as you want. Oh, yeah, they might. I think that using something like that would probably be tedious because you'd always have to remote into it. And whenever I remote from my laptop into my desktop, it's just a slightly worse experience. So whatever I do, I want it to be native, and I also want it to be what most of the team is using. That way, what I'm doing is supported. A lot of the problems with Windows development, when Windows development is not the main platform, is that there's just extra setup steps and extra maintenance steps, and sometimes that gets to be nightmarishly difficult. And yeah, I've had that happen to me in the past 5 years. I don't want to deal with that. Do that with auto setup in the ARCs, yeah. How do you miss that in the programming efficiency course? The snapping, that's not necessarily in that efficiency course. And also, most people who I show that to are like, "Wait a second, that's desired behavior." I thought that was a bug. Just install guacamole. You can RDP, SSH, VNC, etc. in your browser. Whatever. Oh, weird. Well, the issue is the latency for me, not with SSHing. Although, anyway, I don't think there's going to be an issue with me just getting whatever computer and then just running that. It's been annoying you so much. Well, now that you know it's not a bug, maybe you will find a use for it because this does happen to me where I'm like, how many more items are there left? And then I'm like, okay, cool, let's go back to the top. Okay, so ensures there are enough resources. So since I doubt I'll ever be manually adding nodes if I even use Kubernetes, I am gonna ignore this part about how I would specify it and just let it self-register and do that. So ensures there are enough resources for all the pods in a node. The scheduler checks that the sum of the requests on containers is no greater than the node's capacity. Some requests includes all containers. Yeah, and so there's probably, if I had to guess here too, the scheduler probably has some way of saying, hey, I want to schedule a new container somewhere, but the only way to schedule it would be to relocate some of the existing containers so that there's space. And I'm guessing this is just built in. They haven't explicitly talked about that yet. And I suppose the reason why is because without a replica set, you might not be able to do that with no downtime. Also, I guess if you had a stateful container. So if you've enabled the topology manager, then the kubelet can use topology hints. Yeah, this sounds a lot like affinity and taints of, hey, we can schedule something somewhere to make it faster. It won't move them. But does it have the ability to move them? Or is that purely a thing that you need to manage? I guess what I'm thinking about is let's say you had a bunch of nodes that had like a capacity of 10, and then you had a bunch of images that had a size of either 9 or 2. Wait, no, that's not a good example. Hang on. There are numbers that make this work better. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to try to illustrate this. I guess it doesn't matter. All right, let's move on. So control plane node communication. This, I'm guessing, is this dotted blue area to any one of these nodes. And we can see on the diagram that it all takes place through the API, and we also know because someone in chat said that too. So I want to know what this is all about. This document catalogs the communication paths between the control plane, really the API server, and the Kubernetes cluster. The intent is to allow users to customize their installation to harden the network configuration such that the cluster can be run on an untrusted network or on fully public IPs on a cloud provider. Interesting. Yeah. Kubernetes has a hub and spoke API pattern. All API usage from nodes terminate at the API server. None of the other control plane components are designed to expose remote services. Yeah. The API server is configured to listen for remote connections on a secure HTTPS port. with one or more forms of client authentication enabled. Okay. This is pretty important, so we're gonna write this down. Node communication between nodes and the control plane. Put a reference there. So nodes only ever communicate through the API server. Well, to the control plane via the API server. And I have this written down in my terms as well. That's okay. I think redundancy is sometimes important for education. But there's something else I wanted to write here. Yeah, the intent is for your cluster to be able to be run on untrusted public machines. As such, authentication and authorization is done to the API server over HTTPS. Yeah. Okay. So you can put it in a private network for both control plane and worker nodes, or you can put the control plane API exposed to public and worker nodes in private. Wait, I'm having a hard time parsing this. Or you can put the control plane API exposed to public and worker nodes in private. Yeah. I think I see what you're saying, but I think their design philosophy here is they're okay with you running any of these nodes in the cloud on some just who cares garbage machine, and that's not going to result in someone getting access to your control plane necessarily, because all of this communication is going to be secure and everything is authenticated and then potentially authorized as well. Well, more granularly authorized, I guess. Authorized also, it's kind of always linked to authentication. So EKS is going to be essentially Amazon running the control plane for you. This isn't loading. I had some issues earlier today with DNS. I don't know if this is another DNS problem. Running Kubernetes on AWS requires an understanding of both AWS network configuration and Kubernetes networking requirements. When you use a default cloud formation template to deploy your Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, everything typically just works, but small issues in your configuration. We'll pay particular attention to how to ensure your subnets are properly configured. Okay. EKS cluster consists of two VPCs, one managed by AWS that hosts the control plane, and a second managed by customers that host the worker nodes. Yeah. So they're running everything themselves privately, and then presumably open some inbound and outbound ports for that communication, likely 443 for inbound traffic. And then you don't get to touch any of that stuff. You just get to communicate with the API server. That's my guess. Yeah, they have this here. Was this supposed to be a NIC? Yeah. ENI is what, Elastic Network Interface? Yeah. And then what's this thing supposed to be, a load balancer? Anyway, I think this is probably fine. Okay. Each node has a token, so you can ask the API server to do stuff. Depends what roles the tokens have. Yeah. Okay. Deja is wrangling EKS. Huh. Okay. Well, let's keep going here. So nodes should be provisioned with the public root certificate for the cluster such that they can connect securely to the API server along with valid client credentials. A good approach is that the client credentials provided to the kubelet are in the form of a client certificate. See kubelet TLS bootstrapping for automated provisioning of kubelet client certificates. Yeah. Okay. Pods that wish to connect to the API server can do so securely by leveraging a service account. So that Kubernetes will automatically inject the public root certificate and a valid bearer token into the pod when it's instantiated. A Kubernetes service is configured with a virtual IP address that's redirected to the HTTPS endpoint. Control plane components also communicate with a cluster API server over the secure port. Default operating mode is secured by default. It can run over untrusted and/or public networks. Yeah, I think this is pretty helpful. Yeah. So that's node to control plane. I think the only other thing they cover here is control plane to node. There are two primary communication paths from the control plane to the nodes. The first is from the API server to the kubelet process, and the other one has to be to the proxy one, right? Second is to any node, pod, or service through the proxy functionality. This now helps explain what the proxy is for. Yeah. So whenever the control plane needs to talk to a pod, what are the other ones? A pod, technically the node, although not all control plane to node communication is done through the proxy. It goes through the kube proxy. Now, why might it need to talk to a pod? A pod is just a collection of containers, right? So I guess it might need to start or stop a container. And why would it not just tell kubelet to do that? I have some conflicting information here. The first is to the kubelet. The second is through the proxy. Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep reading. This will hopefully clarify it. The connections from the API server to the kubelet are used for fetching logs, attaching to running pods, and providing port forwarding functionality. This is not what I would have expected. Yeah, this is not what I would have expected. And they don't even talk about the proxy in this one. Connections service default to plain HTTP and are therefore neither authenticated nor encrypted. They can be run by prefixing this. What? This seems very unsupported, this second part. Because it's not safe to run over untrusted networks. I guess you don't necessarily have to be running on an untrusted network. There's a pod and API is another pod inside Cube system. Okay, so this part about Cube proxy making everything routable is really all I had written originally. This I don't think is correct, or if it's correct, that it's incomplete. All right, let's finish reading this, I guess. Connections terminate at the kubelet's HTTPS endpoint. By default, the API server does not verify the kubelet's serving certificate, which makes the connection subject to man-in-the-middle attacks, unsafe to run over public or untrusted networks. To verify this, it's not possible to use SSH tunneling between the API server and kubelet. finally, yeah, okay. Yeah, this wasn't the clearest. Hey, APX, I've been doing well. How are you? Yeah, I guess I'll just write this down as this whole page wasn't super clear. Super clear to me. I didn't understand exactly which traffic happens through the, and I gotta write down to send this to Flying Meat, I guess. Happens through the kubelet versus the proxy, or why want to be used over the other. And then connectivity service. So here's another trend I've seen with everything Kubernetes related is let's turn C's into K's for no reason. As a replacement to the SSH tunnels, the connectivity service provides TCP level proxy for the control plane to cluster communication. All right, now let's read the same sentence, but with all of the C's replaced with K's. All right, as a replacement to the SSH tunnels, the connectivity service provides TKP level proxy. So what is this? It's a server and the agents running the control plane network. This wasn't in the picture though, right? Connectivity service. Yeah, I don't see it here unless I consider it to be a controller. Not there. Maybe here. No. Oh, this is pretty new though. Oh, okay. Well, then let's read it again now that I know that it's totally new. Yeah. Hey, Salman. Yeah, so as a replacement to SSH tunnels, it provides TCP level proxy for the control plane to cluster communication. Connectivity service consists of two. So this is to allow you to have. No, TCP on its own is not secure. No, I'm not sure what this does. Connectivity agents initiate connections, maintain the network connections. After enabling the service, all control plane to node traffic goes through these connections. I don't totally get it. They said you can use SSH tunnels because HTTPS terminates before you get to this communication, but it's still over HTTP, which is TCP underneath the hood. So I guess I don't totally get what this is. I want to look into this a little bit more and find out why this even exists. Connectivity service. None of this is all that helpful. Or searching through Google is any better for this. Google's DNS can't be found. Or not the DNS, sorry, the IP address. What has been happening? What's funny is I'm using Google's DNS servers through my router. Is my router not able to be contacted? I can't even connect to my router right now. Am I still online? Like barely able to send chat messages. Look at what my chat message looked like. Blank space, picture, blank space. Oh man, yeah. I don't know what's happening. Alright, well, let's keep going, I guess. Yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit more about this. I guess I'll just add it to my list of questions. Sounds like it's a TCP connection to replace another TCP connection. I suppose that's one thing, is that perhaps by having a persistent connection open, they're not continually opening new ones for HTTP traffic. Have new ones each time for HTTP traffic. Right, so the SSH tunnel, though, the thing about SSH is that it will be secure, whereas TCP is not going to be secure. I should say insecure, not secure by default. And secure by default. And what doesn't make sense is, like I said, I think original traffic was over HTTP, and they suggested that you switch to SSH if you needed security. But there's probably more to it than that. And also, it's probably not very important given that it's very new, and that I guess once it's no longer in beta, it'll be documented a little bit better. There's probably a way to find more information on it, though. All right, so controllers. In robotics and automation, a control loop is a non-terminating loop that regulates the state of a system. Here's one example, a thermostat in a room. When you set the temperature, that's telling the thermostat about your desired state. The actual room temperature is a current state. Thermostat acts to bring the current state closer to the desired state by turning equipment on or off. So we've got to fully understand thermostats before we can move on. So let's go look into HVAC repair. Maybe buy some real estate. Set up a heated room. Try to scale that room horizontally. In Kubernetes, controllers are control loops that watch the state of your cluster, then make or request changes where needed. Each controller tries to move the current cluster state. Yeah, so we have this written down already. Yep, control loops that try to shift the current state to the desired state. Yeah, okay. A controller tracks at least one Kubernetes resource type. These objects have a spec field that represents the desired state. I see. I don't think I ever documented what the spec field was. No, I just wrote the word specific or specify. Oh, also this was supposed to be this level of header. How much is worth writing about this? Who knows? Let's just start a new thing. Controllers. The spec field for objects indicates the desired state of the object. These are the kinds of things that I bet if you use Kubernetes, you do not need a note written about. Hey, Redman. All right, the controller might carry out the action itself. More commonly, a controller will send messages to the API server. I find this part surprising as well, because that's also not what I wrote down. Via the API server, but apparently they can do this themselves sometimes. I wonder how. Direct control. Some controllers need to make changes to things outside of your cluster. Controller needs something outside to set up new nodes. How does a controller do that? If you use a control loop to make sure there are enough nodes in your cluster, then that controller needs something outside the current cluster to set up new nodes when needed. What? Controllers that interact with external state find their desired state from the API server and communicate directly with an external system. None of this makes sense. Not only does none of it make sense, but there's no arrow here for controlling anything else other than the API. Very strange. Hey, Novak. So they can remove SSH support from codebase. Replacement is just a generic TCP proxy, so you can run whatever you want over it. Okay. Jeffrey said, different purposes, often used by network administrators. HTTP's not TCP, but it's using that as the transport layer, right? I could have sworn that was the case. Yeah, as we can see by Wikipedia, this site cannot be reached. Well, yeah, yes, not for HTTP 3. Does I mean HTTP 3 isn't widely adopted yet, right? But also, when people say just HTTP, I think it can be reasonably like, isn't HTTP 3 just for web traffic to try to speed up parts of the? I don't remember enough about this. Yeah, I'll have to learn a little bit more about this. But yeah, okay, let's close some of these many tabs I have open. Too bad. Too bad I just can't use the internet. I still can't even access Google. Oh, oh. No, I don't think it's gonna work. Although if we can access Bing, we could probably just look up Google IP address and then just go directly to that. Never mind. Ping your DNS. I cannot even access my router right now with the local, like the network IP address I have here. I don't know how this could possibly be happening. Maybe the router's web server is down. Change DNS locally. It should be my router. Check something really fast. Yeah, it is my router. And it just keeps timing out my request. I didn't do a Windows update. Yeah, I wonder if I shouldn't use my router at all for that. I think the router kind of sucks for DNS. I also think that router is just dying. But I'll change this afterward. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner, actually. Oh well. Yeah. Same with this section. Almost none of this made sense to me. Earlier, as in when we got to the glossary and we looked at controller, did they talk about doing this through the API server? They talked about of your cluster through the API server at least. Some controllers also run inside the control plane, running control loops that are core. Yeah, I guess I'll change this. State for the desired state. When this state has to do with your cluster, it's typically done via the API server, although apparently not always. There. You need your router or gateway as a DNS if you have other host names on your local network you want to resolve. Yeah, right now that's what's happening. My computer is set to go to my router, which is set to go to Google. And I can't contact my router right now. I mean, that's not exactly what's happening, right? The router has to be online, or else there's no way that I'm actually on the internet. All right. As I mentioned, that part didn't make sense to me, but maybe if we back up a bit, I can find out more. The job controller is an example of a Kubernetes built-in controller. They manage state by interacting with the cluster API server. Oh, wait, is it only built-in controllers that do that? Then maybe this wasn't wrong. Yeah, I think it's only for built-in controllers. although not always. I believe that all built-in controllers only interact with the API server to converge on the desired state. But controllers in general could make changes themselves. It's just weird. This isn't a cloud controller manager. I try to access the router directly via its IP address? Yeah. Don't I have high availability routers? I've got a cluster of 6 routers running in different parts of the world, and I've got an Ethernet cable running directly to each one. Only the API server can talk to etcd? Well, no, so, okay, what I was trying to say is that I had a note written originally saying that control loops, so controllers are control loops that try to shift the current state toward the desired state. And what I had after this is via the API server. And I thought, okay, it has to go through that. But apparently that's only when they're shifting the current state of your cluster, which, yes, has to be done through the kubelet on each node. But then they said here, which is what threw me for a loop, that some of the controllers can converge toward the desired state without using the API server, but it's not necessarily about your cluster, but it kind of sort of is, because if you need more nodes in your cluster, then this could do this. And so I don't know. That's why I don't know if it's that this is a little bit sloppily written, or if it was my misunderstanding of it, or was the presentation of these things. Hey, really, yeah. So that's why I want to be specific here. Yeah. Regardless, when changing the state of the cluster, of the nodes themselves, the only communication is through the API server. Okay, let's keep scrolling down. Desired versus current state takes a cloud native view of systems and is able to handle constant change. Cluster could be changing at any point as work happens, and control loops automatically fix failures. This means that potentially your cluster never reaches a stable state. As long as the controllers for your cluster are running and able to make useful changes, it doesn't matter if it's stable or not. Okay. Yeah, welcome. If not, I've been learning Kubernetes now for about 5.5 hours. So it's still pretty new to me, and we're just going through this list. And the reason why we're doing this is it's similar to Jenkins. From what I understand, and I haven't used Jenkins, Jenkins is more for continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. And in that sense, it's pretty much just a task runner. So you would say something like build my containers, or whatever, like deploy this code to this machine. Whereas with something like Kubernetes, you'd say something like, I want this infrastructure set up. And it would go put like containers onto a node and scale, I don't know, whatever. Like it'll follow a bunch of rules that you have. And in that sense, it's handling more of your infrastructure than it is trying to deploy, but it can deploy. Can I give you a recap of day one? The recap of day one is pretty much, if you just look at my notes, it's these headers that I covered. So like the history or the purpose of Kubernetes, a lot of the terminology, and we covered a little bit about object, and that's it. And so today we've gotten into architecture some more. It's hard for me to sum up day one by saying like we did X, because literally all I've done so far is go through the documentation and take notes. I do not plan on concretizing any of this by making a Kubernetes cluster and seeing how nodes get laid out and where containers go. That's not my plan. So I think the more important summary that you'll probably want is why I'm doing this. And the why I'm doing this is because I'm currently awaiting a Google job offer, and my job, which is somewhat secretive apparently, will somehow involve Kubernetes and related technologies. I don't know exactly how, so I can't say what the best way to prepare is. It's like, let's say if I was going to get a job at a at a game company, and I'm like, well, I don't know what game engine they use, so let's go learn Unreal and let's go learn Unity. And then in the end, we find out, oh, it's a custom game engine. It's not like learning either one of these is going to be a bad move. You still are going to internalize some concepts that are similar to all game engines, but yet it's not the best move. If you could just learn the custom one, you'd be better off, right? So I don't know what's best to do. And when I'm in touch with my eventual manager, I'll be able to find that out, but I'm currently not in touch with them. So I'm awaiting an email, which I imagine will arrive today at some point. And then if I can ask a question over the weekend and just say like, hey, is this the right way to go about this? Then cool. How long do you think it'll take to hear between the interview and job offer? So to be clear, the interview was like August 24th or something. I'm just making up a date, right? Actually, I don't remember when it was exactly. But anyway, I heard the conclusion on, I think, August 26th saying like, you got the job. And then it went to team matching, and that took a very long time. And then team matching was done, and now what we're waiting for is like kind of the offer. So we're in the offer phase right now. And how long should that take? I imagine it's going to be Wednesday of next week. Now, the reason why is because every time the recruiter has said, oh, you'll hear back early next week, it has never been early next week. It's always been the middle of the week. So that's what makes me think it's just going to be Wednesday. And yeah, then if the offer looks good and I sign it and everything, I would probably want to start pretty much as soon as possible. So the 12th or the 19th, that's my guess. How do you survive with the daily anxiety? So the only way that the job offer would be rescinded, most likely, is if some like a major thing happened. Let's say the team just totally lost funding. Let's say that I do something really stupid online. Those are the kinds of things that could make it fall through. And I highly doubt that stuff's going to happen. And if it did, it's not the end of the world, right? I just find a different job. And thanks, Suki. Yeah, so this is, I think, the important part of why I'm going through all this, and it informs the way I'm going about it. I'm covering a lot of breadth in the concept as opposed to diving in and getting my hands dirty. And the reason why is because I don't want to dive into something that I find out is just totally wrong. So, yeah, we're doing this in a little bit of a weird way. Now, the way that I write my notes, one thing that I think is really important is there is a ton of blue here. So like every single one of these terms is a link. Almost all of these little bullet points are links to other things. So even if these aren't helpful on their own, I'll at least be able to be like, wait, what? What was I referring to here? And just click it, find out. So yeah, I think this will be helpful. Right, your cluster could be changing at any point. So what they're saying here is that you may never find stability in the cluster, but that's okay as long as the controllers are working toward that state. The controllers, the desired state may never be reached, and it could be a moving target. Well, I should say, or it could be a moving target. The desired state may never be reached for other reasons, even if it is a stationary target. It's okay as long as controllers are constantly working toward it. Yeah. And I guess I'll put that here. Design. As a tenet of its design, Kubernetes uses lots of controllers that each manage a particular aspect of cluster state. We learned about this already. Most commonly, a particular control loop uses one kind of resource as its desired state, has a different kind of resource that manages to make that desired state happen. For example, a controller for jobs tracks job objects and pod objects to run the jobs. In this case, something else creates them, whereas the job controller creates pods. I see. Useful to have simple controllers rather than one monolithic set of control loops. Controllers can fail, so Kubernetes is designed to allow for that. I wonder how. There can be several controllers that create or update the same kind of object. Resources linked to their controlling resource. You can have deployments and jobs. These both create pods. Job controller does not delete the pods. I see. Okay. So in general, controllers are intended to be small and specific. A resource created by a controller should only ever be managed Well, I shouldn't say managed, maybe. Yeah. Have I started the new job? No, I haven't actually even gotten the new job yet. So I'm still waiting on the offer. And any good resource for beginners? For beginners of what? Are you talking about coding? Are you talking about Kubernetes? Are you talking about something else? Kubernetes. Oh, no, I don't necessarily have any good resources other than what you see me using. Then again, I've only been learning this for a total of about 5.5 hours. So I can't necessarily vouch for this because I have no proof that I've learned anything. Yeah, so I'm just on this site and I just click documentation and I've spent 5 hours just going through all the bullet points on the left side. Now it doesn't look like a lot, but as you click it, it expands and then turns into a lot. So we've been working our way through concepts. Yeah, sure, if not. I won't take a look at it on stream. I don't tend to look at other people's copyrighted stuff on stream, but I will write it in my notes. How difficult was the Google interview on a scale of 1 to 10? At one point I had my own like personal scores for how I thought I did on the interview. So let's say I rated myself on a scale of 1 to 10 of just how I think I did. I I think some of the interviews were pretty good, like a 9 or a 10, and then a couple of them were like not so good. There was probably like a 3 in there and maybe like a 6. And then I don't remember what I said the fifth one is, maybe let's say an 8 or something like that. So this is how I think I did. As far as difficulty goes, that's very hard to say. Yeah, that's very hard to say. And I think the reason why is because the difficulty isn't really in the interview, it's in the practice. But maybe that's me being pedantic. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. And why the 3? I can't really talk about the specific interviews. Yeah, sorry. I'm not saying this to be stubborn or difficult. Understanding the architecture is the first thing. For understanding the architecture, I've got some system design notes that you might find helpful. If you go to the miscellaneous section of my notes and then system design, I think if nothing else, just these resources at the top are very good. And then if you do want to look into something else, I took a bunch of notes as I was learning this, and I think this helped greatly. So I highly advise this. Oh, system design of Kubernetes? Okay, never mind. Yeah. Yeah. Then never mind. Ignore what I just said. Did you have to do any leak code for Google Prep? Yeah, I summed up all of my interview experience on my blog right here. By the way, there is now a new blog post as of yesterday, which it has the wrong date. But top learnings from my own startup. If anyone's interested, you can check that out. This is from the last 5 years. I summed up the most important. Excuse me. I started crying. I only got Adam on the TV on the audio track. Oh, nice. Hacker at work indeed. I have not been sharing what the level is. Well, let me rephrase that. I stopped sharing what the level is once I thought maybe that's not good information to share. How often do you toss a joke in an interview? It's a very interesting question. I do when I feel I can joke with the other person. Some people just have personalities where you can tell them a joke and that they'll laugh, or at least they won't take offense to it. And other people have a very sort of uptight personality. And I'm not even talking about in interviews. I'm just talking about in general. And so if you sense that that person's the kind of person who enjoys jokes, then you joke around. So that's it. Can we create a GitHub repo out of it? The doc instead of Notepad? Oh, out of this? Oh no, I don't plan on doing that. I don't plan on maintaining this ever. That's why. Like I wrote this down once, and I will probably come back to it at some distant point in the future. But other than that, it'll just be here in the notes. Yeah, so Okay, so we wrote this stuff down. I think that's pretty good. Ways of running controllers. Comes with a set of built-in controllers. These built-in controllers provide important core behaviors. The deployment controller and job controller are examples that come with part of Kubernetes itself. Kubernetes lets you run a resilient control plane. Do they have a link to it? So if any of the built-in controllers were to fail, another part of the control plane will take over the work. You can find controllers that run outside the control plane to extend Kubernetes. Oh, interesting. That's probably where this comes from, direct control for doing things outside of your cluster. It's weird though to say that they're outside of the control plane entirely, but I guess at that point they sort of would be, but they probably still need to talk to the cloud controller manager. I don't know. All right, well, I think we're good there. Yeah, I think we're good there. I do think I want to write down maybe one other thing. No, that's fine. Let's move on. Let's close all these other tabs. Cloud Controller Manager. Oh, the beta just means when it was introduced as beta, not that it's currently in beta. That other thing that we read about, the connectivity service, was 1.18, and we're in 1.19. So it was only one version ago, so it's possible that it's still in beta. Is this a remote position? It's not remote, but everything around here is remote for some amount of time. I think I have a less joking command for this, by the way. So I've been asking people, actually, how many people in chat work in the US and are going into work? As in, you are not working from home. It is not remote. All right, so cloud infrastructure technologies lets you run Kubernetes on public, private, hybrid clouds. Plays an automated API-driven infrastructure without tight coupling between components. Partially remote? So you have to go in every once in a while? What do you do? Fully remote? Employers decided they're abolishing their office? Man, I wonder how much it costs to run an office. Because that's something I never dealt with. But let's say you've got 30 employees. And so you've got some office space. I don't know how many square feet you need for that. Is that like hiring a 31st employee? Or is it like hiring another 5 employees or what? I guess it depends on what city you live in. 6 Gs a month at least? I see, A-Train. Got it. Well, 6 Gs a month is not another employee probably for a lot of these companies. So I guess it's not too bad. Check out WeWork prices. Here's a guide. Oh, is this just like a WeWork? Why is the font so messed up? Oh yeah. Okay. So it's not super cheap, I guess. But yeah, it's not like hiring 5 more people or something. Doing 50% in office work, rotating employees in shifts. Hmm. Interesting. And do they have apprenticeships? I don't know. A lot of these questions I think I'd probably be able to answer if I'd been at the company for, let's say, like 8 months. But yeah, at this point, like I said, we're pre-offer. Okay. Kubernetes control plane component that embeds cloud-specific control logic. Cloud Controller Manager lets you link your cluster into your cloud provider's API. Separates out the components that interact with the cloud. Yep. So we learned about all this. By decoupling it, the Cloud Controller Manager component enables cloud providers to release features at a different pace compared to the main Kubernetes project. Yep. Yeah, there's pretty much no other way I think this could have been designed and still had it been sane, at least with respect to the cloud part of it, is there are many different clouds, and we can't list what all of them will be because we can't predict the future. So let's make that part be its own little component and not influence the rest of this. Just be a point that you can interact with. Hey, Funky Monkey. I worked at my last job in, I guess, what I would call like a semi-open workspace. So everyone had an assigned desk. And so you might have something like, person A would be here and person B would be here. And these little walls that I drew were half cubicles. So if you were to stand up, they would come to like your waist. So you could see over them. It's not like there was this sea of walls that you had in front of you. Where can you find the notes? If you type the notes command, quads? We didn't call it. We called them half cubicles. I don't know what quads are, but maybe. Yeah, they could be the same. Okay, runs in the control plane as a replicated set of processes. Usually these are containers and pods. Oh, someone mentioned this earlier. Yeah. I want to write this down. Typically runs in a pod itself. There we go. Which cloud controller manager implements multiple controllers in a single process. So the kind of resilience you get by running something in a pod is that they will be in multiple containers, and so you get sort of process resilience, where let's say a process dies, another one can just pick up where it left off. What you do not get is availability zone resilience or even technically physical machine resilience. So then I guess what happens when your cloud controller manager dies completely then? So you can distribute this across multiple nodes? Why did I pick Google out of the thing? The today command kind of talks about it. If you just look at the top of the document, I think it's the second paragraph. What is that? I'm too dumb for that. If you're talking about what I'm saying, like process resilience, first of all, it's a term I pretty much just made up. But what I mean is, let's say you're running like a Minecraft server, and so you have this server, and that's it. It's just an executable on your machine, and then it crashes. Then that's it. No one can connect to your Minecraft server anymore, right? So at that point, what you might say is like, okay, you know what I'll do? On computer A, I'll run Minecraft.exe, and on computer B, I'll run Minecraft.exe. And now computer A crashes, and so you say, oh, well, we'll just fail over to computer B. And so what you've just gained now is that this process can crash, and your other computer will be fine. Well, now let's say your house, your router goes offline. Well, now both your computers are just not available to the internet, so your Minecraft server is down. So now what you do is you put computer B in a different part of the world, and now you get resilience across your router failing. So anyway, it's just different levels of availability or resilience, and at what layer you're going to get that resilience at. So what I was wondering about with this is for them to say that this is running on a pod. Pods are run on a single node. They are not spread across nodes. So if this is run in a pod and your node fails, then it sounds like your cloud controller manager also fails. But Metalstorm was saying that you could run this somewhere else. Well, I mean, I know you put simple with a kappa after it. The concept of something failing, at least from the Minecraft example, should actually be simple. Like, you know that if you run something on your computer and your computer dies, that thing's no longer running. So if you still wanted it to run, you'd have to have it running on multiple computers. And, you work your way up the chain of where do you want fault tolerance. So this is something, oops, not that. I searched for the wrong thing. Let's search for this. So daemon set ensures that all or some nodes run a copy of a pod. Run in a daemon set. That is something that I hope will be explained, yeah, with the workloads. And we're not there yet, right? We're still on cluster architecture, and then it gets to containers, and then it gets to workloads. What's in containers? Oh boy. This probably won't be too bad, actually. So we'll get there, and then we'll be able to talk about how to get something to run and be highly available. Where's the glossary again? Because I'll probably want to write this down. Daemon set ensures a copy of a pod is running across a set of nodes in a cluster. This phrasing is somewhat ambiguous. I'll probably hold off on this then until I get to that article. Okay. All right, let's look at the functions. Node controller is responsible for creating node objects when new servers are created in your cloud infrastructure. Node controller obtains information about the hosts running inside your tenancy with the cloud provider. Node controller performs the following functions. So before finding out about what these functions are, what I would expect is we ask the cloud provider, hey, give us a machine. They give us a VM or some concept of something that can run containers, basically. Then we create a node object internally so that the control plane can track this thing. Then when it's in a healthy state and it's got the kubelet running and is reporting that it's healthy, we can start scheduling pods on it. So let's find out if that correlates to what these steps are. Initialize a node object for each server that the controller discovers through the cloud provider API. Sounds fine. Annotating and labeling the node object with cloud-specific information, like the region, CPU memory. Okay, yeah, I didn't say that, but that sounds reasonable. That's part of the self-registering, I believe. No, not quite, actually. The self-registering would be able to tell us this, but it might not be able to tell us. No, it certainly wouldn't be able to tell us these things because that's cloud-specific. Obtain the node's host name, and yeah, sure, cool, okay, and then verifying the node's held. Okay. What's my formal degree? CS, computer science. How is it ambiguous? What I think was ambiguous about this is that when they say ensures a copy of a pod is running across a set of nodes, what it sounds like is that the pod itself could be distributed across that set of nodes. But that's not exactly what's happening. It's that like you have node A and you have a pod here, and you have node B and you have a pod here. And this would be like pod A and this would be like pod A prime. And so what they're saying is that this is a copy of the original, not that it's somehow running across both nodes. Now what I imagine is what I just said, is the answer to this. Is, like I said, the A and A prime thing. But it's possible that's not what they mean. There have been a couple times now where I felt like I understood something, and then they're like, oh, by the way, what you understood is not what you understood. Yeah, separate process, okay. Yeah, then you know what? I will write this down now. So this is daemon set with no space. It's a pod running 2 containers, one on each node. Wait, that does go counter to what I thought then. Also, hey, rival. I have this written, a pod cannot span nodes. All right, let me write this down the way I understood it, and then let's go try to find something to back this up. So it ensures a copy of a pod is running across a set of nodes in a cluster. So this ensures that a copy of a pod is running on a set of nodes as opposed to just one. Popped in and see if there's an update. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Well, there should be from the last time you popped in at least. Okay, yeah. So this does not mean that the pod itself spans nodes. It's a copy of the pod. No, Metalstorm. I think what I was saying is the distinction here. Like, yeah, something needs to be running on every node, but I suppose if you look at a pod as being like container A, container B, and container C, then saying that a pod runs over multiple nodes could kind of sound like there's node 1 handling this container, and then node 2 is handling the other two containers, and that's not actually what's going on. It's that there's a copy of these things like that. You have a deployment with 2 pods and you have 2 nodes, it'll try to put each pod in a separate node. Yeah, that's what the scheduler will handle, right? So this ensures a copy of a pod is running on a set of nodes as opposed to just on one node. This does not mean that the pod itself spans the nodes, it's a copy of the pod. The same pod definition is used for each node. Okay, so this is typically used for high availability. All right, I think we're pretty good there. Route controller. So I didn't write down anything about this. I don't think it's necessary yet. I think knowing that, hey, the cloud controller managers was responsible for interfacing with your cloud is all I need to know for now. But as we read, we might find something more important. Daemon set 1 per node, deployment X, which you specified in the whole cluster. Wait, are you saying it violates like this definition that I have written down? Or for critical node services like Qproxy? Yeah, so I'm going to give points to the people who contributed to this. I think that's everybody. Wait, it didn't go in if not a. That was weird. No, you may not get a point. The route controller is responsible for configuring routes in the cloud appropriately so the containers on different nodes can communicate with each other. Depending on the cloud provider, it might also allocate blocks of IP addresses. Yeah, okay, this makes sense. Again, though, this fits into does stuff on the cloud. I smelled smoke for a second. Services integrate with cloud infrastructure components such as managed load balancers, IP addresses, network packet filtering, target health checking. Service controller interacts with your cloud provider's APIs to set up load balancers. Okay. And what else do we have here? Node controller only works with nodes. It requires full access to read and modify. Oh, this isn't really necessary for me. Out of curiosity, what's the code base for this look like? I'll definitely need to brush up on Go again. Yeah. Yeah. Specifically, one of the things that I've forgotten now is how channels work. You can send and receive values through channels. By default, both operations block until the other side's ready. Buffered channels will block based on a buffer size, range, and close. The sender can close a channel to indicate that no more data should be sent. By using range channel, where channel is a specific channel, you will receive values from the channel until it's closed. And select statements. Select lets you wait on multiple communication operations. Blocks until any of the given channels have data on them. Oh, interesting. Okay. Knowledge, have you been watching for that much time? Or was that just how long you had the stream open for? Might be a fire over there. Such a great command. Does it actually do anything? It should have whispered you, I think. Oh, it's just gone? That's weird. Did I seriously get rid of that? Hang on a sec. This is gonna bug me if I don't look into this. Phantom bot commands browse points. Oh, I did just get rid of it. Wow. Points don't really do anything anymore. Have fun collecting them. There we go. Let's go back to this. So I don't think there was anything important to write for all of that. So now let's move on to containers. I want to try to make it through at least all of these sections because I expect this will take about 45 minutes and then I'll reevaluate because I will likely start to get hungry around then. Always watch when you take for some sort of lurker. Well, some people do just leave the stream open or they connect via IRC. All right, each container that you run is repeatable. The standardization from having dependencies included means you get the same behavior wherever you run it. Containers decouple applications from underlying host infrastructure. This makes deployment easier in different cloud or OS environments. So if you're watching this and you don't know what Docker is or why containers are helpful, some of this is going to be important information for you. I don't know how much of it yet will have to do with Kubernetes specifically, but this is just generally, hey, why might you want containers? Well, for one, it's got all of its dependencies baked in, and another, it doesn't really matter what your host looks like if it can run containers. A container image is a ready-to-run software package containing everything needed to run an application. The code, any runtime it requires, application and system libraries, default values. By design, it's immutable. You cannot change the code of a container. If you have a containerized application and want to make changes, you need to build a new image. Yep. There hasn't been an offer yet, Volk, but if you take a look at the today command, I do mention that it's going to be Google. All right, so container runtime is software. Yep, yep, yep. All right, that was actually a very fast section. Are all of them fast? Well, to be honest, all of these sound like they're more related to Docker than they are to Kubernetes. So, well, let's keep reading though. A container image represents binary data that encapsulates an application and all its software dependencies. Container images are executable software bundles that can run standalone, and they make very well-defined assumptions about their runtime environment. You typically create a container image of your application and push it to a registry before referring to it in a pod. By the way, I wonder if there's like a good free container registry with no stipulations. I said a lot in that sentence. I don't think there are. Docker Hub just changed their restrictions about how many public images you can have and how big they can be. GitHub said that there's no restriction right now, but they'll eventually have one that's the same as whatever their other restriction is, 500 megabytes and some number of images. Have I tried installing what yet? Kubernetes? No. The goal is not for me to do anything concrete with Kubernetes from all of this. The goal is to steer myself toward what I'll hopefully need to know on the job, and I unfortunately don't know exactly what that is, so I'm kind of just breadth first searching my way through the documentation. And at some point, I expect an email today with my eventual manager's email in it. Yeah, I guess if you self-host the registry, but then you have the cost of self-hosting it, which if you're doing anything in production means that it needs to be highly availably self-hosted. just deploy the registry itself to your Kubernetes. Currently a soft size restriction for the container registry. Oh, that's actually not all that permissive. Because the containers that I was making worked out to be like 100 to 150 megabytes each, I think. I mean, that's like 100 containers, which I don't think is great considering that you typically have different versions of containers. But if you get all that for free, then that is great. So yes. All right. What else do we have? Yeah. Okay. So image names. I do not care to read this. Updating images. Default pull policy is if not present, which causes the kubelet to skip pulling an image if it already exists. if you'd like to wait a second. So, what this is probably for is you have a container in your pod that, let's say, needs to run the database. So the first time around is going to pull it from your container registry. Then I guess if it dies is when this policy might come in. I think so. It's not super clear when this happens. Will you be talking about layer sizes, not whole container sizes? Hopefully there'd be some sharing of layers between containers. I was talking about image sizes actually. I think the containers themselves might share something, but the images are just going to be in like Docker Hub or something, and I don't know if anything gets shared there. Are you gonna be streaming sometimes after starting? I'm hoping to, yeah. That's like if you update the latest tag, what happens, and delete and restart a pod. Okay, well, I think this section could be clarified a bit. Earlier, I think it was mentioned that controllers always go through the API server. So hearing that controllers interface outside of the control plane probably seems strange. Doesn't actually mention when the update is done. Usually on deleting a pod or just a container dying and needing to restart. Have images in registry and locally. Pull always means you pull the image from the registry before starting it. So it is even if the container dies, right? Oh, it's even just starting up. Even just starting up. If you needed end containers with image X on them in the same pod. How's your Linux foo? I I don't extensively use Linux, so I mean it's probably not like terrible. But if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's like a 3 or 4. And that's assuming that I'm at like a 9 on Windows, I guess. Otherwise, I don't know, those numbers change. It's about startup. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this can be a little bit clearer, but that makes sense. I'm looking for some advice. I've been applying for jobs, and basically, I have a choice between a job in data science and a job in automation and robotics. Both seem like really interesting fields, and I just don't know how to go about choosing. I think that there are a couple considerations. One, if you can at all, try out the work. And I don't necessarily mean like go work for each job, but I mean set out with a small project in automation, set out with a small project in robotics. And with robotics, you're probably gonna have to look into something like a kit or an Arduino or something so that you don't spend a ton of money. Two is consider the markets for these things. From my point of view, and this is a very limited point of view, automation jobs are going to be more common than robotics jobs. So maybe just based off of that, you say, okay, well, this seems a little rarer, so maybe I go with the robotics job. Now, that might not actually be true. I'm just saying if it turns out that it's like a 90-10 ratio of availability, maybe go with that 10 if you get the opportunity because it's so much rarer that maybe it won't pop up again. But yeah, I think number one here is going to be pretty important. The other thing, of course, is just talk to people about what's important to you on a job. Maybe you want to ask like how much coding is there, how much like what's debugging like, what's testing like. Because with something like robotics, that could potentially be through a simulator and not even through a robot, let's say. And whatever else you find important, work culture, the team setup, the resources you can use. I see smoke. Yeah, this happens a lot. And let me just drag this on the screen right now. Pod is running my image dev. You build and push a new one. You delete and restart the pod. You won't see your new container. Let's see. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tom. I wonder if I should include this here. I guess I'll put a section for containers. Is this all still in architecture? No. So I'll make a new entire setup here. Containers. Put this here. And then I don't even know what we want to write exactly. I think I just want to put all this in this. Updating images. So images, the policy by which images are updated is image pull policy. Specifies when to update container images. Tom, you mind if I just copy paste this into my notes? That's pretty funny. Sorry, I'm just playing out a scenario where you're sitting in an ice cream parlor, Atomic Nibble and Tom. And Tom's like, I'll have a chocolate ice cream. And Atomic Nibble steps in and is like, chocolate tastes better. Just a funny little misunderstanding. No, so that's fine. Yeah. And I understand the distractions and stuff. Okay, so multi-architecture images with manifest, as well as providing binary images, a container registry can also serve a container image manifest. This I'm not aware of. Can reference image manifest for architecture-specific versions. Oh, okay. But I wonder why machine architecture would matter much here. Oh, maybe for builds that you might do? No, it says no. It's for underlying. I guess I guess it's for the performance features of something specific that might have been done in the container runtime. Yeah, it must be for that. Yeah. Okay. Running an ARM built image on x86 is impossible. But we're talking about the containers, right? As long as your container runtime exists, shouldn't it be able to run every container? I guess still not. Okay. Then that's probably worth writing too. Images, architecture, e.g. ARM versus x64 needs to match the container runtimes architecture. Close this. Using a private registry. This I don't think I'm going to write down too much about. This is, I guess, even if you're using something like, what is it? ECS, Elastic Container Service. Except for that's not what it's called. ECR, Elastic Container Registry, or something like that. Yeah, the CPU is not virtualized. Yeah. Yeah. I should write this into Docker if I don't already have this here. Unfortunately, I can't see the search bar because of the drop frames thing. So I'll just resize this. I typed that correctly, yeah. The Docker container runtime doesn't virtualize the CPU. So container images need to match the architecture of the host. Hey, Ender. And thanks. Yeah, it's good to be back. And hey, Skeletus. Good to see you too. Well, I don't recognize your name. Because I don't think I've ever said that before. Huh. Maybe I have said it before. You've been in chat before. Anyway, it's been nice to be back. I was telling my wife about this, that I took quite a break from doing things. Pretty much everything. Like yesterday, I got back into the swing of things by streaming. I also wrote a new blog post. You guys might find this interesting. I pretty much just stopped trying to do any marketing in my blog posts. So there's no email sign up. There's no links to my courses or anything. It's just a blog post. And it's not mobile garbage like other blogs that you might have seen where there's like an ad every 3 pages or 3 paragraphs. I see Maelstrom. You can practice, you decide on one and then go with it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the private registry stuff I don't really care about too much here. This is the kind of thing where if you ever need to do, you'll just look it up and then you'll do it. Pre-pulled images. Kubelet tries to pull each image from the specified registry. Yeah, I don't think this matters too much either. Image pulled secrets, sure. Yeah. So now what's this? Use cases for a private registry? Sure, sounds good. Cluster running some proprietary images, which would be hidden to those. Visible all cluster users. Use hosted private Docker registry. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think this is mostly fine. Now look at this. Which company did I go with? I have chosen Google. I am waiting for an offer from them. I expect it'll be mid next week. Yesterday, I said that I expected it would be either yesterday or today. Turns out I was wrong about that. Spend some time to learn image pull secrets. Useful when pulling from Quay. Adding image pull secrets to a service account happens a lot. So I'm not saying I don't think it'll be valuable eventually. I think that for what I'm going to be doing, it might not be the best thing to focus on yet. So I'm not even positive I'll ever be using Kubernetes. It just might be important to know Kubernetes. And that's what's rather unfortunate about my current situation is I'm not currently in touch with my future manager. So I can't just ask like, should I go learn this? Is this going to be important on the job? All I'm trying to do is get ahead of the curve a little bit and make sure that when I start, I'm not like, Kubernetes, what's that? And people just glare at me like, why did we hire you? I just talk about chocolate ice cream all day. So container environment. Container environment provides several important resources to containers. A file system, which is a combination of an image and one or more volumes. And we're talking about a container image at that point. Oh, yeah, from the container's point of view. Okay. Information about the container itself, information about other objects in the cluster. Now, what is this? And where is this? Where's that diagram? I thought this would be part of the kubelet. Yeah. No, it wouldn't be part of the kubelet. Never mind, because there's the kubelet, there's a kproxy, and then there's the container runtime. And this is part of the container runtime, I guess. So what other objects in the cluster would it need to know about? And why would that be in here? Oh, I guess they talk about it, so never mind. I should stop asking myself these questions. How am I liking it so far? I don't think you can really say if you like a technology before you've used it, and I'm not probably going to be using it anytime soon. I'm just going to be learning it. From what I've learned about it so far, Seems reasonable. Seems like it's pretty well designed, but I can't say much more than that. I mean, this would be sort of like learning C++, and then someone asks if you like it before you've written a program. And I'm not saying it's a bad question to ask, by the way. It's a great question to ask. It's just, I don't really have a great answer. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, Ender. Even if I don't use it, if it's even tangentially related to the job a little bit, it's probably good to know. And even if, let's say I found out, oh, hey, you're going to be working on Google Chrome, where I imagine Kubernetes doesn't really come in at all, it's still knowledge. It's still probably helpful somewhere. And maybe I talk to another team and they're like, hey, we need to, I don't know what. So hostname of a container is the name of the pod it's running in. Is available through the hostname command or get hostname call in libc. Pod name and namespaces are available as environment variables through the downward API. I have not heard of this before. What is this? This is in inject data into application. Yeah, so then we'll ignore this for now because that means that we're going to get to it eventually. Pod name and namespace are available as environment variables. User-defined environment variables from the pod definition are also available, as are any environment variables specified statically in the Docker image. Okay, yeah, this all sounds pretty reasonable. Cluster information. So I did not write this down though. Container runtime. I'll put a reference to this whole thing. So the runtime provides, aka I guess I'll call this the Kubernetes container environment. They capitalize the K and the C. Yeah. It provides, what was actually important here? Not really any of this. Yeah. Hey, Chris. Being angry at YAML simulator. I'm trying to think, did I have that experience with Terraform? I think I sort of did. With Terraform, what was nice is if you created a resource that wasn't what you expected, but it was at least valid, you could go inspect it yourself through your cloud platform. Now, if you made something that was not valid, you just got some cryptic error and it sucked. And also, I guess if you were setting something up with containers, that sometimes it was difficult to debug what was going on. And there were ways you could kind of make it easier, but you had to build custom images or I don't know. So yeah, that was difficult. Maybe logging would help a lot with that. Hey, Tupperbox. Oh, your sub canceled because I turned off subscribers on the whole channel. So there's literally one subscriber now, and it's Rami, and it's because you could be gifted multi subs, like a 3-month-long sub. I didn't even know you could do that. Yeah. So Rami's the only subscriber. My dashboard doesn't even show a subscriber field anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, it looks like it's 0. Let me see if it shows up today. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's gone now, Tupperbox. All right, a list of all services that were running when a container was created is available to that container as environment variables. Those environment variables match the syntax of Docker links. For service name foo that maps to a container name bar. Services. Okay. The runtime provides cluster information to each container in the form of environment variables representing the host and port of each service running. Concepts overview working with Kubernetes objects is the most important section. I think, yeah, I looked through that one already. And I think we took notes about, yeah, I took notes about all these things. These were in, yeah, this section. That's what I ended up taking notes of. So those are just services running in the cluster. They read from that API and make changes. Yeah. What if someone really, really wants a sub? They just can't. What's the killer app for Kubernetes? Don't see any common use cases where edge, runtime, and database abstraction layers wouldn't be fine. So Spartan, I don't know if there's a killer app necessarily. I think really anything that is running with a microservice architecture would make sense to be Dockerized and thrown onto the cloud. And then that's where Kubernetes comes in to orchestrate all your containers that you have. Now, this is coming from someone who is new to Kubernetes, so that's my take on this. I think that the kind of people it makes sense for are the people working for mid to large size businesses that have these scalability requirements and desire to represent their infrastructure this way. Whereas, yeah, if you were to take just like the average website, let's take my website for example, would Kubernetes help this? No, probably not. This is all running on Firebase right now. And what's important that I'm getting from this is hosting, I'm getting cloud functions, and I'm getting a database. And that's it. That's what most things are going to need. I guess I get authentication. So authentication is part of that too. These things are important. This is for most like small to like small medium businesses. They're probably just going to need some combination of these things. And it's like, hey, if your platform just lets you scale these things out, awesome. So I think that seems to be quite a sticking point for people getting to Kubernetes is that they're like, oh, I've heard a lot about this and it sounds like something I might be able to use. And then you get into the details and you realize, wait a second, this is more complex than what I need. And even potentially it might cost more than what you need, depending on how you're using it. Yeah, the scale of the deployment. The thing is, I feel like those two things are related. That if you have tons and tons of users, chances are you're going to have a more complex infrastructure as well. But I suppose that's not always true. Like, let's say if Adam Learn's got like 5 million users, I don't need to touch anything. Granted, it's going to cost a lot of money if that happens. Okay, runtime class. Page describes a runtime class resource and runtime selection mechanism. Runtime class is a feature for selecting the container runtime configuration. Container runtime configuration is used to run a pod's containers. Oh, this is very unhelpful, these couple of sentences. Features for selecting the runtime configuration. I guess I need to know what the runtime configuration is then. Is that in the glossary? No. Yeah, okay, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll find out by just reading the rest of this. Thanks, Vatzel. I appreciate it. So you can set a different runtime class between different pods to provide a balance of performance versus security. For example, if part of your workload deserves a high level of information security assurance, you might choose to schedule those pods so that they run in a container runtime that uses hardware virtualization. You then benefit from the extra isolation of the alternative runtime. Oh boy. I guess we'll write some of this down, but this just does not seem very clear still. So this was container runtime, and this is runtime class. This is a mechanism for selecting a configuration for a particular container. Like tweaking Docker. Selecting a particular container runtime. or for selecting or modifying. All right, tweaking Docker. Yeah. Okay, and thanks for clarifying that. All right, setup. Ensure that it's enabled. It is by default. Also, feature gates. Is this just one flag controlling many features? I see. Sure. Okay. It sounds like, yeah, there's just a bunch of flags for this. All right, so configure it, create it. I don't necessarily want to use this. I think just knowing it exists is important, but something like this might be helpful. What do you know about what cloud config is? I've never heard of it. I think cloud config is not the official name of the team. From what I understand, whatever that team is doing is secretive enough where I was told a high level overview of what the work might involve. So I was told things like, it's sort of like Kubernetes or Terraform or something like that. And it sounds interesting. Yeah. I start playing around. No, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. Yeah. So again, just to explain the motivation behind a lot of this, the today command talks about it. There's a link, that bit.ly link goes to a Google Doc. And of course nothing loads for me, so I can't show you guys this. Actually, I have the tab open still, yeah, so I can show you here. So I am currently waiting for an offer from Google. I don't know exactly what kind of work I'm going to be doing, so I'm trying to just learn in general about what I learned from that team matching interview, which wasn't really an interview, I guess. So it's possible that what I'm doing is touching on some of these concepts I need to know, and it's possible that it's just totally unrelated to this point, and it's like, why would you go learn that? So I don't know, and that's why I don't want to get into anything concrete yet of like, oh, let's actually set any of this up, because it's possible that I just don't need to know that level of depth. How do I customize it and what version is it? I've got all that in the OneNote command. Do the other teams feel like they'd be similar levels of learning? Let me think about this. So there were 4 teams. Like I said, one was very performance focused. Number 2 was kind of like robotics. Number 3 was about storage, and number 4 was about this cloud configuration. I guess I should say cloud storage here. I don't think this one would have involved the same level of learning. Not in this way, at least. The cloud storage one probably would have been learning a lot about Google Cloud Platform. And then this cloud configuration stuff, I'm not totally sure what it's going to involve. So it's hard to answer that question. With that said, let's say I was working on like a Node.js and JavaScript setup or something like that. I imagine there's still tons of learning that is Google specific that happens even if you knew the public technology inside and out. Maybe that's not entirely true. Like maybe if you were working on open source software at Google, that there wouldn't be like tons of stuff to learn because you could already have dealt with that open source software. But yeah, got any ideas about start date? I do not have an offer yet. So I'm expecting an offer sometime around Wednesday. And then after that, I expect to start pretty much immediately. Now, for those who didn't hear me say this yesterday, Google only starts people on Mondays. So that means that I'm hoping to start on the 12th, and if not then, the 19th. And of course, if not then, you just keep pushing it, right? So I'm hoping it's here. This is my goal, is to hit this date. And what job did I take? It's in the today command. If you take a look at that document. Will you get sent a hat? I don't wear hats, so I hope not. Oh, one of those propeller hats, though? Is that what we're talking about here? I hope I don't get one of those. I see that as just like junk. Something I'll never use or display, so it just sits around. So yeah, I hope they don't give me that. Loads of core things on GitHub you could look through. Yeah, so what I'm still hoping for is that ideally today I end up getting the email address of my manager and can just ask, hey, is this along the lines of what I should be learning? You can start on a Tuesday if you choose a week where Monday is a holiday. Yeah, but I don't think that's Okay, yeah. I mean, I suppose that's related to what I was saying, but I don't think that's necessarily going to happen in the next few weeks. 3D extended. Okay. So as of Kubernetes 1.16, runtime class includes support for heterogeneous clusters through its scheduling fields. Through the use of these fields, you can ensure that pods running with this runtime class are scheduled to nodes that support it. This does not seem like the kind of scheduling that I would expect. Now, with that said, the scheduler in Kubernetes is what's responsible for figuring out where these jobs will run. So I guess it's related to that scheduler. I guess I'll just write this down. This has scheduler support. Did I write this down anywhere? Yeah. You can make sure that the scheduler will take runtime, what do they call it? Runtime class into account. What language did I interview in? I think it's safe to say that it was JavaScript for everything that I did. What I have found is that for big tech companies, at least, what's important is the algorithm or the data structure much more than the language. And what I've also seen is that if they do let you choose a language, your language choice is like 7 or 8 different programming languages, one of which you're going to know. So I did not find that to be restrictive when I was interviewing. Okay, pod overhead. You can specify overhead resources that are associated with running a pod. Declaring overhead allows it. I don't know what this is. Allows a cluster to account for it when making decisions. I'm gonna just write this down too. Not clear what overhead resources are. And there's no way to find out more. Pretty much anything that was tagged with 1.18 in beta, it just doesn't have information about it. The same thing happened with Customize. I don't remember where that was. Hey, James. And I'm probably not going to find it now, huh? It was one of these two, I think. Maybe it was the other one. Customize. No. No. Come on, where was it? Was it this one? Was it not called Customize? Connectivity is what it's called. Okay, thank goodness. Which I did write down. No, maybe I didn't. Hey, Johnny, man. And hey, Jay Tyler. Use any sort of scheduling or organization methodology, such as GTD? I don't know what GTD is. Also, hey, Arjun. But, and I wouldn't say I use any sort of standard methodology for this. What I tend to do is, at least for the last 5 years, it's been largely just kind of personal work. So there was one other developer for some of that time. And the way we shared tasks was different from how I worked. But given that it was largely personal work, I would use lots of different to-do lists. And the way that I tend to think about these things and tend to structure them is I would have different headers. So for example, I have like a homework header, and these are things that I need to do after the stream. And then I'd have something like, okay, learning, doing Google prep. And at any given time, I would generally know what's the highest priority thing. And then I would just work down this list. At the end of any given day, I find it incredibly helpful to write these 4 words, which stands for where I left off, 4 letters, excuse me, and just say something like where I left off and just, do something like this. And bam, next day you come back and you've got that context again that you had from the day before. Typically, you might want to also include some extra context here, like I was struggling to understand blank, So pretty much anything that can increase your momentum the next time you come in. I don't know if this kind of answers your question or not, Tyler, but if it doesn't, feel free to ask something more specific. Data features, yeah, just scrounge blog posts and GitHub issues. Yeah, I find that kind of frustrating. Excuse me, and I kind of want to get feedback on that. This was in the control plane node communication, which is there. Yeah. Where I can find more information about connectivity. Excuse me. So it's not clear what they are. In order to get more. There's also no links to get more information. Thanks, Jay Tyler. Did I go through all of this now? Because we got down to pod overhead. Yeah, we did. Okay, so the last thing here is container lifecycle hooks. You do cube? I was watching The Office yesterday, and somewhere in season 8, Dwight and Jim are helping Nellie move. And they say, I'm hauling cube. So you say, I do cube is funny to me. I think we should just change it to Holland Cube. Just change this to a K. So you're already looking at some quite advanced topics. I assume you already have the basics done. I am just going through the docs from top to bottom. So some of this is not exactly contextualized for me, and others are not being solidified by just not having practiced it. And again, the reason for all of this is because I am about to start a job at Google, and it's going to somehow involve Kubernetes. I don't know how, and if I knew how, I would be able to focus my learning a little bit better. But all I'm trying to do is learn as much as I can until I get direction to know what I should learn. This page describes how kubelet managed containers can use the container lifecycle hook framework to run code triggered by events during the management lifecycle. Okay, so container lifecycle hooks. Container lifecycle hooks. This is a way to run code based on the lifecycle of a container. I should just say when a particular thing happens. Yeah, let's say it that way. Code when a particular thing happens to a container, e.g. it just started or it's about to stop. Yeah. How can we learn new things in computer science just from official docs and not from courses? Zachariah, I think you've probably seen me do this on stream enough to answer that question. Like, typically, I think I have a command for this. It's very hard to read this. General learning. Yeah, here it was. So this is kind of how I look at anything, because people ask this a decent amount, like, hey, how do I learn Docker? How do I learn Kubernetes? I think it's always going to be an answer of it's a combination of stuff. So you might know about a video series, you might know about a tutorial, you might know about a book you can read, there might just be the documentation, and it might be none of that. Maybe you just go directly to practice. And when it comes to practice, I think laying out projects for yourself will give you a structured set of goals. So you can pick and choose any of the things you see here, and there's other things too. You can talk to people, you can get a teacher, you can whatever else. And how you learn or how you like to learn is going to be potentially different from how I learned. So the way I've been going through this is just looking at the documentation and taking notes. Will this be helpful for me? I have no clue. And I have no clue on two different levels. One, will I ever even need this information in the future? And two, if I need this information, will it help me the way I've written it? So yeah, who knows? But the way that I've written notes in the past, I think it's nice to have what was written in my own words to solidify a concept as I'm learning it, and then to have that reference back to where I learned it from. Personally started applying some of the basic concepts. Tried to read all the docs, but it's a lot. Yeah. And really, if you ignore the interview prep streams, The last probably like 2, 3 weeks of my streams have just been looking through docs and writing notes in the hopes that someday I will use those notes. So it is a very weird way of pursuing things, and I recognize that. Okay, analogous to many programming language frameworks that have component lifecycle hooks like Angular, provides containers with lifecycle hooks. The hooks enable containers to be aware of events. Yep, sounds pretty reasonable. Hook is executed immediately after a container is created. So that's it? There are only 2 hooks? That's okay. You can access a hook by implementing and registering a handler. Okay, yeah, no, this sounds pretty good. So you could run a script, or you could say what to call in that container. Totally cool. I could see a need for both of those. Hey, Romer. Trying your hardest to learn how to get things out of documentation. It's one constant that always seems to exist. Other things can be sparse and expensive at times. Yeah, I think I'd generalize this a little bit into try your hardest to get what you can out of what's presented. And what's presented may be docs, it may also be a code repo, and it may be a point of contact for a technology. And then I guess you could find like sort of tangential articles like blog posts or something like that. And all of this bubbles up into self-sufficiency, which is going to be, well, except for a point of contact, I guess that's just sufficiency. Yeah, there are a lot of problems that I've had to solve in the past where I had to use some part of this. Probably everyone's dealt with this style where you didn't know how to do something, you looked it up, and thank goodness someone on Stack Overflow already posted that same question. That's kind of what I mean by blog posts, any internet post. Some people have found bugs by just looking through code. This is actually pretty frequent when the docs don't suffice and something's open source. You'll go look through the code and you'll be like, oh, this is just never coded. So it's not like I'm using it wrong. It just doesn't exist. Motive and determination. Practice trying them. Oh, and practice trying matters the most. Yeah. Issue trackers, Stack Overflow, code searches. Yeah. I think saying documentation is generally poor. Some documentation is actually really, really good. And it's hard to come up with an example right off the bat. I think the Docker documentation is actually pretty nice. They've done a very good job. Oh, and also everything on MDN. MDN is just amazing. Like if you look up pretty much anything, if you look at like image contained or something like that, I don't know. Oh, right, I can't do searches. Well, MDN is great. Yeah, and I find whenever documentation has well explained examples that it's very good. Oh, also Rust I think was good documentation. Yeah. Okay. Either via an executable or script, or by calling into a REST API, well, an HTTP API, hosted by the container. While working for Google using Bing, even if I went to Google right now, I'm having DNS issues. All right, an entry point and hook can fire asynchronously. Okay, I don't think I want to include anything more for that. Behavior similar to pre-stop hook if the hook hangs. So these things, the hooks are required before, what's the word I want? Transitioning into a new state. Are required to complete, to have completed, to be, to. Why is English failing me? I'll just say to complete before transitioning into a state. For example, without the, what's it called? Post start? Post start, yeah. Without the post start hook finishing the container. Is it the container? I want to make sure I'm getting terminology correct. Yeah. Container cannot enter the running state. Man, I hate resolving merge conflicts too. I find that it's difficult because you have to put yourself in the point of view of another developer on your team typically when you're not expecting to do that. So it's totally fine to empathize with someone when you're like, okay, it's a code review. Let's think from their point of view. But when you're like, hey, I want to pull code, and it says merge conflict. All right, hook delivery guarantees intended to be at least once, which means that a hook may be called multiple times. Generally, only single deliveries are made. Yep. Yep, this sounds fine. And debugging, I'm not going to look through. Okay, so we have left off here at workloads. I am going to just quickly click through a few of these and see. Give me a sec. Left off, we're going to right here. I want to just see how many sections are as part of these. So this one's not too bad. This one, so that was 2. This is, let's just estimate like 11. We're at like 13. This is another like 7 or so. Let's say 20. Oh boy. Okay, yeah, no, there's a lot. We've got at least like 30 sections left. I'm trying to figure out how many streams this would take if I were to continue in this same fashion. And I think it'd be, I mean, at this rate, probably 4. Now, granted, we have time for 4 streams next week. I do not expect to go through all this next week. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, by Monday or Tuesday, I should have heard back about what's the best topic to learn. And 2, I don't want to work all of next week. So I imagine we'll probably do 8 to 12 hours of streams. No, I didn't block search engines. Yeah, this is just an internet problem for me right now. I got to go figure out what's wrong with my router. So yeah, and let me check my email really fast to see if I got a response, because if so, I can. No, I did not. Yeah. So for again, anyone who didn't see, if you take a look, this document here talks about what's going on, why I'm learning the way that I'm learning for this. Let me close this. So I'm waiting for Google to get back to me, and when they do, it'll be with an offer, and I will be able to set a start date at some point. That will probably come soon. When that happens, you will not see me streaming very frequently. So I'd like to get into a routine at some point, but anytime we're talking about nights and weekends as streams, it's hard to commit to that because that's when plans happen. And I don't want to take away from certain parts of my personal life. Like, I don't want to say, oh, I can have it all, and then, I don't spend time with my wife or something like that. So I want to be very careful about that. And yeah, but at least for next week, I should be back on Monday. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I'll post updates on Discord about this stuff. And I hope you have a good weekend. So bye, guys.